The man opens his eyes in the middle of a lake with a red drone flying overhead. Visions of his family, spaceships, and shootouts flash before him. Finally gathering himself, the man swims towards the shore, accompanied by the drone, which he calls Ezra, to check his mental health. Suddenly cries for help echo from the lake, and another man, followed by a woman, appears. None of them remembers what happened to them. Fina recognizes the wreckage on the shore as the remnants of a warship called Karik, and Ezra recalls an invasion. Then the men discover the remnants of a car that must have been there for centuries. Apparently there used to be a road in this place. People remember the invasion, and it turns out they all died in different years. Moreover, Abram confesses that he is 67 years old, although he looks 25. According to the red drone, they were brought back to life in their prime years. Their memories are different because they died at different times. Around them is Earth, but 400 years after the extinction of humanity, destroyed by aliens. They were resurrected by creatures living in the water, called sparks. The ultimate goal is the revival of humanity, and the rest of the information can be found in the settlement where the others who have returned live. The drone orders Ezra to collect the sparks. Gathering their meager belongings, the people set off after the drone, trying to understand why the Kariks revived them. Soon they find partially destroyed arches, and Abram rushes to them, rejoicing in his young, strong body. On one of the structures, he sees unknown hieroglyphics and touches them. The man is thrown back, and he admits that he saw everything. Suddenly the red drone is shot down, and a second shot wounds Abram. The trio runs behind a hill where Ezra, setting up an ambush, captures the pursuer. The man, named Jax, denies the existence of the settlement. The glowing substance on his neck is a skin rider, which is one with the human body. He needs the sparks, but Fina confidently demonstrates her proficiency with a weapon. Abram insists that when he touched the unknown symbols on the arch, he felt the vastness of outer space. But this elicits mockery from Jax, who suddenly frees himself and lunges at Ezra. However, Fina points his own weapon at him. This time they tie the man securely and leave, despite his claim to know Ezra's brother. Soon the team takes shelter in a cave, while others with glowing parasites on their necks are found, including Ezra's brother Silas. Meanwhile, the resurrected people in the cave discuss ways to recreate a human being and wonder where the aliens obtained the initial material. During the night, Abram's wound becomes inflamed. He is lowered into a small pond where the sparks are released. By morning, Abram emerges completely healthy. Fina discusses what happened to Ezra, as she doesn't understand why they chose her out of millions of great people. Soon the resurrected individuals see high walls of a settlement in the distance, but on their way, skin riders with glowing necks catch up to them. Ezra stays behind to delay the pursuit. He manages to do so for a while until he recognizes his brother Silas among them. In the meantime, Fina and Abram reach the settlement's walls, and just when it seems they are destined to be captured, the gates open. A yellow drone neutralizes the skin riders and lets the fugitives inside. It then flies after Ezra, carrying him through the air into the settlement where there's no one around. In response to all their questions, the drone invites them to follow and shows them rows of graves where the settlers rest. Later, the yellow drone opens the doors of an abandoned military base for the people where the previous settlers lived. In the forest, skin riders capture a man who escaped from them. Silas discovers that the glowing creature they call companions has inexplicably stopped functioning in Duncan's neck and promises to fix it. The resurrected individuals learn that the settlers died from a new virus that still spreads throughout the region. The yellow drone asks them to release the sparks into a vessel with water and learns from them that the sparks can create a vaccine if people bring the ingredients found in the living lake. Fina begins to bleed from her nose, and she stays at the base while the men go to the lake. She takes on the task of repairing the damaged red drone. On their way, Ezra tries to understand how the system that brought them back to life works. The drone operates on sparks, but who controls the sparks is unknown. The men reach the lake and release the sparks into the water to collect the necessary ingredients. In the settlement, Ezra's wife Lynn suddenly appears before Fina. She explains that she worked as a nurse during the invasion and can offer help, but then disappears just as suddenly. On the lake's shore, Ezra confesses that one of the skin riders is his brother, meaning these people are also resurrected. He recalls the moment when he first saw the alien spaceship flying overhead and signaled to his brother that he was a worthless, spoiled child. Now he is determined to apologize and try to retrieve Silas. Meanwhile, a hologram of Lin appears again to Fina, helping her repair the red drone. In the meantime, the yellow drone warns of the approaching Skin Riders. Ezra asks Abram to run while he himself tries to intercept his brother Silas. However, he gets surrounded and subdued. Regaining consciousness, he finds himself alone with his brother, who admits that he prohibited forcibly transforming him into a Skin Rider because he wants his brother to join them voluntarily. Each Skin Rider has a companion on their neck, which teaches the person how to behave correctly and telepathically connects them with others. Thanks to the companion, Silas is now the leader and mentor for the others, whereas in the previous world, he was nobody. Then Silas suddenly falls asleep, signaling Ezra to leave. Ezra meets Abram in the forest, to whom he explains his intention to save his brother. The men return to the lake, where the Sparks have created 3 vaccine capsules for them. After consuming their doses, they bring the third one to Fina, whose condition worsens. Lin asks the red drone to replace her image with someone dear to the girl, and Duncan appears next to Fina. Fina regains consciousness after her friends administer the vaccine. The next day, Abram finds a room that is blocked, revealing a glowing obelisk. Meanwhile, in the forest, Silas argues with Duncan about the purpose of the companion controlling the thoughts of the Skin Riders in the community because Silas believes it amounts to slavery. In the settlement, Abram learns to read hieroglyphs and understands that the unknown hosts offered to dig up weapons against the Skin Riders in the forest in exchange for more people for the settlement. Ezra goes to the forest for the excavation. Meanwhile, Silas brings Duncan to an open area where Jax conducts training fights, taunting regular people. Unexpectedly, Duncan defeats Jax. Silas stops the duel and explains that he tested his theory, revealing that humans react faster by a fraction of a second than Skin Riders. Currently, Duncan has a weak companion, so he makes decisions with just one brain, the human one. In contrast, Skin Riders with healthy companions have a signal that passes through 2 brains, the humans and the companions, causing a slight delay. The conclusion is that humans will always outperform them in combat. To gain an advantage over humans, Silas plans to perform brain surgery to reduce the signal delay. However, a working drone and a test subject are required for this. In the meantime, the yellow drone brings Ezra to the excavation site, which the Skin Riders immediately learn about. Ezra unearths an item that the yellow drone calls a weapon. In the settlement, Abram, upon touching the obelisk, suddenly realizes that he understands the meaning of the hieroglyphs on it. However, he doesn't yet grasp what this knowledge entails. In the forest, the yellow drone warns Ezra about the approaching Skin Riders. They attempt to flee, but the Skin Riders surround them and take the unearthed weapon. Unexpectedly, the weapon activates and kills one of the Skin Riders. Taking advantage of the chaos, Ezra scatters the rest and escapes. Meanwhile, Fina tries to find out from the red drone why the unknown beings are resurrecting humanity. She requests the revival of Duncan, unaware that he has already been resurrected and has become a Skin Rider. Ezra brings the weapon meant to eliminate Skin Riders to the obelisk, hoping it will help establish contact. However, he refuses to kill the innocent inhabitants until the obelisk explains who they are and what is happening. The drones controlled by the obelisk promise to resurrect Ezra's family if he obeys them in all matters. Ezra has no choice but to comply. Later that night, Fina goes to the obelisk, where she finds Ezra, who, like her, hopes for the return of loved ones. They notice that the weapon unearthed in the forest has opened. The obelisk issues new symbols, instructing Fina to go to the lake to receive new people. However, Skin Riders spot her on the way. As for Abram, the drone tells him about the structure of the glowing companion on the necks of the Skin Riders, which is tightly connected to the human brain through a crystalline structure. The weapon found in the forest destroys these crystals, eliminating the parasite. When a Skin Rider dies, its memory is preserved on the crystal, which is passed down to its ancestor. This is what needs to be found and destroyed. Fina sees Lin emerging from the lake and helps her get ashore. When Jax appears on the shore, the red drone neutralizes him. The girls attempt to escape but are captured by Duncan, who seizes the red drone and fails to recognize Fina, his beloved from the past. The girls try to flee, but Lin injures her leg and orders Fina to go to the settlement and fetch her husband. Lin, on the other hand, falls into the hands of the Skin Riders, who return her to the lake. There, Jax shows how the sparks work, healing her injured leg. But suddenly a stone hits Jax's head, and an unknown little wild girl takes Lin to her forest dwelling, providing her with shoes and food. However, it turns out the girl cannot speak. During this time, Fina reaches the base and informs Ezra about the resurrection of his wife Lynn. Despite the Yellow Drone's warning that when Skin Riders take someone, it's forever, Ezra is determined to rescue her. Jax finds the little wild girl's home, but she has already taken Lynn away. They hide in the forest. At the same time, Ezra contemplates how to disable the force field since the obelisk prevents him from doing so, leaving him unable to leave the gates. Fina admits that she saw Duncan, who is also with the Skin Riders now, and he didn't recognize her. She fears the same will happen to Lynn. Meanwhile, in the forest, Jax tracks the runaways and explains that even the Sparks make mistakes, resulting in flawed individuals. He is ready to destroy the little girl, but Lynn persuades him not to do it. At the same time, Silas extracts the crystal companion from the deceased Skin Rider's neck and instructs one of the women to take it to the ancestor. Then, they bring Lynn to him. As for Abram, while communicating with the obelisk, he suddenly surmises that he had lived in this settlement before, which is confirmed by a notebook he found with his own handwriting. Later, Fina speculates that they all have lived here before. The Yellow Drone confirms this fact and leads Abram to a graveyard where he shows everyone who is buried there, including Ezra's grave. It turns out that he had also been resurrected and lived in the settlement at one point. Then the Yellow Drone guides Abram to the next grave where he finds himself and encourages him to start a new life honorably. Fina demands that the man bind himself. He agrees but suddenly snatches a weapon from Fina and stuns the Skin Rider standing behind her. At the same time in the bunker, Abram is trying to find out from Yellow where the progenitor is located. However, she does not know, but Jax knows, and he heads to the bottomless lake, dives into it, and emerges in a cave. Meanwhile, Silas is trying to convince Ezra that life in his community is much better than in the bunker. Fina begins to trust Duncan and agrees with his plan. And in the camp, Lynn's escape is discovered. Duncan immediately receives a message about this from other Skin Riders and agrees with Fina's plan to send them on a false trail to enter the camp and save Ezra. The pursuit heads in another direction. Silas demonstrates to his brother the capabilities that a companion gives to the human body. He dips his hand into a vessel with sparks and explains that they cannot kill a companion as it goes against their principles. So if Ezra wants to kill the companion, he will have to kill the person. Fina and Duncan infiltrate the camp and seize the Skin Riders' weapons, and Jax reaches the ancestors' dwelling place. He asks them to explain how the drone works, and several human figures come out to him. Fina and Duncan find Lynn. The girl explains that after being infected by the parasite, she immediately plunged her hand into the sparks and it seems to have helped. Duncan asks the women to leave while he finds Ezra. The ancestors show Jax how the drone works. And in the bunker, Yellow confesses to Abram that not a human lies in one of the graves. Silas proves to Ezra that the obelisk is no better than a companion, as it also subjugates people. He lets slip that all of them, including his brother's wife and daughter, once lived in the settlement. Their conversation is interrupted by Duncan, who, under threat of arms, takes Ezra and leads the group to the settlement by a shortcut. But the protective barrier detecting a companion in Duncan does not let him pass, unlike Lynn. Then Fina ties his hands. But at that moment, the pursuit led by Silas bursts onto the clearing. Duncan pushes Fina behind the barrier, and they with Ezra prepare to fight. Abram runs to the obelisk, and it lets the men through on the condition that Duncan remains in the yard until they figure out how to free him from the parasite. At the same time, the ancestors express concern about Jax's hatred for humans, as they are much better carriers than Kariks, and they advise him to find a compromise. Meanwhile, Duncan confesses that his companion is still weak, but he is gaining strength. He remembers the settlers and confirms that Kylie is alive. Sparks rejuvenate people in the prime of life, but children at the age of their actual death. He also lost a wife and a child, and it was Fina, although the woman does not remember this. Abram explains that they are another generation of the revived. The first one lies in the graves, and they are them too. Jax reprograms the red drone, refusing everything human that was in its memory. Fina unties her husband, but when she falls asleep, Duncan's companion receives a signal from Silas, and he heads to the bunker. There, Abram confesses to Ezra that the drone showed him the memory of another woman he saw a year before the invasion. It feels like someone knew about the invasion and offered people help. He wants to consult with Yellow, but she is nowhere to be found. This happens because Duncan is just locking the drone behind one of the panels. Then he attacks Abram, knocks him out, and heads to the obelisk, despite his human side resisting it. He screams in frustration and Ezra hears him. He runs to him, but Duncan closes the doors and enters symbols that deactivate the force field. Realizing this, Ezra rushes to Fina and they manage to barricade the bunker doors. Duncan's companion comes out in the open and confesses that all this was done for the sake of the weapon he hid. He is ready to reveal where Kylie is now if they hand over the bunker to the Skin Riders. The man is tied up. Outside, the sounds of banging are heard, Skin Riders trying to break down the door. Through Duncan, Silas offers to hand over the bunker. Then he will say where Ezra's daughter is now, because someone from the first settlement managed to avoid death from disease. A debate ensues, resulting in a decision to deactivate the parasite using Lynn's medical knowledge. Jax returns. He expresses his dissatisfaction to Silas as he could have infected Ezra long ago, but lets him go. Silas cuts off the conversation and orders to continue working on the drone. At this time in the bunker, Lynn tries to figure out how the companion works, and it confesses that it can cause great pain to its master. Ezra and Abram conclude that the settlement existed for at least 10 years, and there must be survivors, otherwise, who buried the fallen. Moreover, Yellow said that a drone is buried in one of the graves. At that moment, the knocking at the door resumes. Ezra remembers that there is electricity in the bunker. Fina digests the cable, and a strong electric shock destroys one of the Skin Riders. At the same time, Abram finds Yellow. Simultaneously, people realize that Duncan is acting as a transmitter, and they move him to another room. As they part, Ezra asks to tell his brother that he loves and believes in him. This message puzzles Silas. Yellow scans Duncan and discovers that the parasite has affected all human organs, and even the sparks cannot save him. Abram tries to get answers from the obelisk. Moreover, Yellow said that Duncan was given access codes, but by whom? The man again remembers that woman in the hospital. She had a drone, sparks, and symbols of knowledge on her bracelet, so something was known before the invasion. At Ezra's request, Yellow shows the image of the woman, and he recognizes his mother, Eleanor. Meanwhile, Silas prepares to continue breaking down the doors, but something leads him to the cemetery. Jax, following him, reminds him that he is not human and he should not care about the graves, so he intends to start silencing personalities from him. Silas is arrested. At this time in the bunker, Yellow confesses that Eleanor was one of the initiators of the revival of the human race. Duncan is not lying. Kylie was in the settlement, and only he can say where the survivors are now. Duncan's companion is knocked out with a tranquilizer and the man is tied to a table. While the parasite sleeps, the man comes to and points on the map the direction the survivors went. He advises finding the wild girl and wakes up. After which, Yellow finds the weapon he had hidden earlier. The people notice the silence outside and, opening the doors, kill the sentinels left by the Skin Riders. Making sure that there is no one else in the yard, Ezra and Lynn say goodbye to their friends and set out to find Kylie. Jax activates the drone, intending to remove the human personality from Silas, and learns about the presence of Ezra and Lynn in the forest. He sends the Skin Riders to follow the pair. Fina comes to Duncan and admits that she is ready to kill him to free her loved one. However, Yellow knocks him out. The man regains consciousness in the cemetery and is relieved, thinking that Fina could not bring herself to harm him. In fact, Yellow has injected a beacon into his body and now people can track his path. At this time, Ezra and Lynn find the wild girl and ask her to guide them to Kylie. Silas regains consciousness when the red drone informs him that he did the opposite, preserved his personality, and suppressed the parasite's capabilities. At the same time, Ezra and Lynn notice they are being followed and try to evade the Skin Riders. However, arrows fly from the rocks, the Skin Riders perish, and the survivors approach the people. Meanwhile, in the camp, Jax leaves Duncan on guard while he and his people follow Ezra and Lynn. They are then scanned for safety, and upon confirmation, the settlement leader Rowan leads them into the camp. She warns them that they do not truly know their daughter. They only remember her up to the age of 6, and they are merely copies of those who lived in the settlement. Abram and Fina dig up a broken drone from the grave, hoping to retrieve data from its memory. Rowan brings Ezra and Lynn to the hidden camp in the mountain caves. Noticing the strange expressions on people's faces, she explains that they both died defending the previous camp from an attack. If it weren't for Lynn, no one would have survived. Silas killed the woman. Fina connects Yellow to the memory of the broken drone, and she promises to show the events of the past. At the camp, Ezra and Lynn's adult daughter arrives. Although she understands what they feel, she refuses to recognize them as her parents. Red notices that Silas is experiencing severe pain. He flies to Duncan, and at that moment in the camp, a bloody Justin appears, who orders him to take the rest of the people and rush to the place where they were ambushed. He carries out the order, and Jax disappears because it was a hologram created by Red. Silas escapes. The real Jax finds the ambush site and orders a search of the rocks. In the bunker, Yellow transports Fina and Abram into a virtual reality of the past settlement, where people go about their daily activities. Jax enters the gates and explains that Silas developed a growth on his neck, after which he attacked his friends. All this happened near the old Karrick ship. Returning to their reality, the people realize that this was the first case of companion infection. Yellow explains that the parasites create a structure similar to fungal spores. Silas likely inhaled them. The parasites themselves were brought by the Karricks, who were their carriers before humans. Meanwhile, a boy from the survivors, Thomas, carelessly falls into the hands of Justin. Silas begins to experience severe pain. Red tries to alleviate his condition and notices Duncan rushing towards the bunker. Apparently, he has discovered his escape and wants to detain Silas. Red leads him another way. At the same time, Thomas learns that he has been infected with the parasite. At the camp, his absence is noticed. Rowan calls a council and Ezra advises them to flee. If Thomas reveals the camp, they will not survive. Yellow shows how Abram proposed to create a virus capable of killing the parasite, although the idea itself belongs to the obelisk. People heatedly discuss this proposal, and many disagree. Lynn suggests splitting up. Those who take the virus should stay in the bunker, as they will be weakened. Rowan speaks against it. Abram realizes that he was the cause of the remaining deaths. In the caves, Ezra urges everyone to leave while he defends them. At this time, Silas reaches the bunker and sees Duncan sitting by a campfire. He lures him into the workshop and locks him in there. Abram is overwhelmed with guilt, runs to the obelisk, and voices his accusations. Suddenly, it creates the image of a second Abram, who says that on the other side of the obelisk are creators who sincerely believed they were saving the settlement. The virus just turned out to be slower than the parasite cells. The second Abram disappears as voices of Ezra and Lynn come from behind the doors. Fina opens the doors, and friends push Silas inside. They immediately disappear as they were holograms created by Red. Silas asks to be heard. The drone supports this request and reports that they cannot destroy the ancestor without Silas. At this point, the boy loses consciousness, and they bring him inside. Ezra, Lynn, and the young archers set up an ambush, but Thomas appears, shoots at them, and wounds Kylie's fiancé, Nico. Ezra kills the boy, and upon examining, finds a parasite. Lifting his arrow, he realizes there is something on its tip. At that moment, Jax appears with his people and calls them to battle. Red puts Silas into a coma. Meanwhile, Lynn and Kylie bring the injured Nico inside. Justin orders his man to watch the backup entrance to the cave. Lynn starts treating Nico, but the worst part is that the arrow tip might have a parasite larva. The boy then demands to be killed, as Lynn herself set such rules. Duncan tries to call any of the skin riders for help, and Yellow explains to Fina and Abram that the parasite is killing Silas so that he cannot reveal the way to the progenitor. Then Red admits that he can link the minds of Abram and Silas, which might help reveal the secret. At this time, Kylie decides to help her father patrol. The girl recalls the past and calls Jax his best friend, which greatly surprises Ezra. And his urge to kill arises because the parasites are very afraid that the human inside might take over if he remembers his attachments. Father and daughter return to the cave, and Ezra proposes that his wife, daughter, and Nico take another road while he guards them. After heated arguments, they head to the second exit. Abram enters Silas's mind and finds himself in a church. It turns out that the boy's mind considers the church a sanctuary. Abram admits that Silas will no longer come to himself, and he himself describes the way to the lake of the progenitor. The parasites are interconnected precisely through it. It is the source of their energy, strength, and knowledge. Silas knows for sure humanity will not survive if the lake does not disappear. Ezra resorts to trickery, and Kylie kills a lurking skin rider. The father bids farewell to everyone and stays in the cave. At the same time, Abram and Fina develop a plan to destroy the progenitor. Yellow explains that the weapon consists of 3 parts. 2 of these are standalone weapons, capable of operating independently of each other. However, the top part is dangerous for humans themselves, so it is discarded. Only the lower part remains, which destroys the progenitor. But this part will not work without the middle, where a human personality must be placed. But the progenitor has studied all the skin riders in this world, so the chances of getting into it are slim. And then Abram realizes why Silas was needed. Later, Fina reflects on her promise to Duncan to kill him and free him from the parasite. Then, Yellow admits that her husband is in the workshop in the yard. The woman arms herself and heads to the yard, but just as she is ready to open the door to the workshop, a skin rider enters the yard and releases Duncan. Fina tries to stop the men, but Duncan reminds her that she cannot kill him and leaves. At this time, Abram comes to Silas again and explains that they need his help. Jax decides to attack, realizing that Ezra is the only defender of the camp. He orders his men to engage him while he himself follows the trail of Lynn, Kylie, and Nico. Nico is losing strength, and Lynn decides to make a stretcher, although the boy asks to just leave him. And Ezra sets up an ambush and one by one eliminates the skin riders, then follows the trail of his wife. Nico transforms and grabs Lynn by the throat. He is ready to kill the woman, but Kylie interferes. The boy's companion admits that the girl is very dear to him, but he cannot indulge the carrier's weaknesses, and when Nico raises his sword, Kylie shoots him. Ezra catches up with them, not knowing that Jax is monitoring their reunion, but he receives a message about Silas's betrayal, and Jax leaves. Silas asks Abram to wait for his death, take his crystal, and insert it into the weapon. Then he will be in the middle part and can help. Abram does not fully understand how it works, but thanks Silas. They say goodbye. Abram comes to his senses when Silas dies, and Jax catches up with Duncan and his men by the lake. After a dispute, he orders everyone to stay in ambush, and he and Duncan will dive to the progenitor. Meanwhile, Lynn and Ezra bury Nico and console their daughter. Simultaneously, Fina and Abram bury Silas. Later, the groups meet, unaware that a black drone is watching them, which takes off above the earth and heads for a spacecraft. Abram tells Ezra everything that happened with his brother and the plan to destroy the progenitor, but he does not want to endanger his family. Yellow vaccinates Kylie, explaining that the vaccine was made by Sparks. The girl tells Fina that Duncan became a skin rider after her death, and no one knows how it happened. At the same time, Abram admits that he no longer believes in the obelisk, but he believes in Silas and is ready to do everything to destroy the progenitor. He tells Ezra about the weapon's operation. A part of Silas will guide them inside, but what to do next, he doesn't know. Ezra laughs at such a plan, and his daughter hears this. Abram and Fina try to convince Ezra that this is why they were resurrected. Otherwise, humanity is doomed. But they cannot persuade him. Then Abram and Fina leave together. Ezra is tormented by guilt, although Lynn tries to remind him of his duty to his family. At this time, Kylie is reviewing the map to the progenitor's lake and secretly leaves the bunker. Red informs the parents that he cannot find the girl, and they, realizing where she has gone, rush after her. Meanwhile, Kylie catches up with Fina and Abram, and later Ezra and Lynn appear. Thus they all come together again. But at the lake itself, they fall into an ambush by the skin riders. A battle ensues in which the group of survivors wins, but Abram is seriously wounded. However, Kylie has Sparks with her, and she suggests releasing them into the lake. As they start doing this, Duncan emerges from the water and shoots Lynn and Kylie. Fina, under the cover of a shield, rushes to him, and they both disappear under the water. Ezra releases the Sparks and brings the wounded into the water. Then a wounded Fina emerges, saying she couldn't overcome Duncan. Ezra dives and finds a wounded Duncan, who has reverted to his true self before death. He apologizes and loses consciousness, and Ezra sees in front of him a glowing something with crystals and fits the lower part of the weapon onto one of them. Then he inserts Silas's little crystal into the middle part of the weapon and looks for the place where it needs to be placed. But then Jax appears. He has always hated his carrier and all humans, and he will not let the progenitor be destroyed. The men engage in combat, and just as Jax is about to win, the revived Duncan attacks him. Ezra finds the right crystal and fits the middle part of the weapon onto it, and suddenly finds himself in a room where he is met by Silas. The brother explains that they are inside the progenitor, and only he could create this home in this place. He is a Trojan horse from which destruction will enter the progenitor. Ezra picks up the box with the symbol of knowledge from his mother and realizes that it is a detonator. The brother says goodbye to him, and when Jax appears, they activate the bomb. Ezra finds himself in the cave where the progenitor is destroyed, to Jax's great sorrow. The man emerges and finds his loved ones healed. Their elation is washed by a black drone, which again heads to the spaceship, where it is met by Eleanor and Duncan. They realize that the deed is done and humanity has a chance. Despite some illogicality, the story is quite extraordinary. It's not about battles with aliens, as the Kariks are only briefly shown once in a flashback, and not about humans' attempts to cunningly escape the dictate of their rule. At the heart is the question of the value of a person, the preservation of which can lead to peace and the rebuilding of civilization. After a fight with her fiancé, Michelle packs her things and leaves, placing her engagement ring and the apartment keys on the table. She drives for a long time through the countryside, stopping at a gas station where she notices a car that has been following her for some time. Late at night, her fiancé calls, trying to convince Michelle to return, but she doesn't want to talk and turns on the radio. She hears a news report about widespread power outages. Distracted, she gets into an accident. The car flips over several times, crashing onto the roadside, and Michelle loses consciousness. Sometime later, she wakes up in a concrete room. An IV is connected to her arm, and her leg is bandaged and restrained with metal chains. Her belongings are piled in the corner of the room. Using the IV stand, Michelle reaches her phone, but there's no signal. Then she hears footsteps, and the door opens, revealing a large man who places a tray of food in front of her. She begs him to let her go, promising she won't tell anyone, but the man tells her that he's not letting her die, and after leaving the key to her shackles, he walks out. Michelle frees herself, gets dressed, and sharpens the end of a crutch, preparing to fight for her freedom, but the man is gone, so she sets a piece of clothing on fire and pushes it into the ventilation duct. The fire alarm goes off, and when the man runs in, he injects her with something, causing her to pass out. When she regains consciousness, Michelle sees the man sitting by her bed. He tells her that she's actually very lucky to be there. She must eat and take her medication because humans have been attacked, though it's still unclear what kind of attack it is. They are now in a bunker beneath his farm. He saw her crash and couldn't leave her to die. Michelle insists on calling the police, but the man explains that the outside world is contaminated. It will take at least a year for the air to be breathable again, and that's only if it was a simple attack. If it were something like Martians, humanity might be doomed. Michelle asks to contact her family, but the man assures her that everyone left on the surface is dead. As Michelle tries to process what she's heard, there's a loud noise from the next room. The man leaves, leaving the door open, and shouts at someone, then returns and angrily reminds her that she should be grateful to him for saving her life. Before he leaves, he introduces himself as Howard. The next morning, Michelle is awakened by a sound coming from the surface and sees the door open. She walks out and wakes a young man sleeping in the hallway. He tries to reassure her, but she explains that she doesn't believe Howard's lies. However, Emmett confirms that everything is indeed as Howard said. Later, Howard shows Michelle the bunker. In the center is a communal area where a special system filters the air. There's a library, a TV, and movies on disc. The kitchen is impressive, with an electric stove, fridge, and silverware. The table is a family heirloom. Access to Howard's personal room is forbidden. Michelle has to use the toilet behind a curtain because Howard fears she might try something dangerous again, like nearly starting a fire. Also, water needs to be used sparingly. After the tour, Howard invites her to sit at the table for lunch. Michelle notices a stack of women's magazines, and Howard explains that they belong to Megan, who is no longer with them. Suddenly, Michelle hears a noise outside and guesses it might be a car passing by, but Howard assures her that it's impossible. He's tired of explaining that no one is left above, even though people thought he was crazy when he started building the bunker. He offers Michelle a chance to see for herself, leading her to a staircase. At the top, Michelle sees a door with a small window. The outside world looks unchanged at first glance, but in the pen in front of the house lie dead pigs with deep sores. Howard explains that those were his pigs, which he couldn't save. Then Michelle recognizes his car as the one that had been following her the night of the accident. Howard points out that these doors are always locked and shows her the key. Later, Michelle and Emmett discuss the situation. Emmett reveals that Howard had served in the Navy. Afterward, he bought the farm and hired Emmett to help with the chores. Howard is obsessed with conspiracy theories, which is why he built the bunker. Emmett wasn't kidnapped. He ran to Howard's bunker, hoping to take shelter because he saw Howard pouring all his money into its construction. Michelle reminds Emmett that it was Howard who caused the accident and brought her here, so everything he says about an attack is a lie, but Emmett insists she's wrong. He saw the attack himself, a flash, an explosion, and the horizon turned red. He's glad he made it to the bunker before Howard locked the door. Michelle tries to refute Howard's claims, unaware that he's been standing in the doorway, listening to their conversation. Howard invites them to dinner, remarking that the two seem to have gotten along well. During dinner, Emmett talks about his unfulfilled dreams and then notices a Monopoly game, suggesting they pass the time playing it. Howard gets annoyed by the chatter, and Michelle flirts with Emmett, provoking Howard's outburst of anger. He yells at her, demanding respect because he saved her life. While Howard is scolding them, Michelle manages to steal the keys from his belt. Howard notices her strange behavior and realizes the keys are missing, but before he can react, a noise from above distracts him and Michelle hits him over the head with a bottle, running for the bunker exit. Emmett shouts after her to stop, but Michelle reaches the door and slips into the airlock just before Howard can catch up. Michelle sees a car approaching the farm. She screams, trying to get the driver's attention, but a woman suffering from a severe skin infection runs to the window, desperately begging to be let into the bunker. Howard forbids Michelle from helping the woman, saying it's too late to save her. Realizing that some sort of attack has indeed happened, Michelle returns to the bunker. Later, Howard admits that he caused Michelle's accident, but it was this accident that saved her life. Howard lends her some of Megan's clothes and sends her to shower since she was near the door. He reveals that he recognized the infected woman as his former neighbor. Since most people knew about his bunker, others may come here too. Howard demands that Michelle stitch up the wound she caused and starts telling funny stories from his time in the Navy. Michelle begins stitching up Howard's wound as he continues to share stories, praising her for her efforts. Later, he brings a box containing her belongings from the car and asks her about her life. Michelle admits that she had dreamed of becoming a fashion designer. Howard in turn shares that his daughter Megan had wanted to be an artist. He shows Michelle a picture of Megan, a young girl, and laments that after his divorce, Megan's mother turned her against him and took her to Chicago. Howard expresses frustration that people don't care about their safety, but at least he tried to protect them. Later, Emmett comforts Michelle, telling her she couldn't have saved the woman outside even if they had let her in, she would have died anyway. They reminisce about their past lives. Emmett, who had been awarded a scholarship to a polytechnic school, admits he got scared and never left for it. Michelle, meanwhile, reveals how her father used to beat her, leaving her terrified of confrontation throughout her life. Emmett reminds her that, despite everything, they're the lucky ones. They survived. Over the next few days, the three of them begin to coexist somewhat peacefully. They play games, prepare meals together, and make small attempts to adjust to their new lives. One day, a loud noise echoes from above. Howard suggests that, if it's the military, it's not Earth's military. The flashes they saw earlier were just the first phase. Now, the second phase, clearing out the territories, has begun, likely by alien forces. Suddenly, the air filtration system fails. Howard asks Michelle to climb through the ventilation shaft to restart the system, as she's the only one small enough to fit. She agrees and begins crawling through the ducts. Eventually, she reaches the filtration unit and manages to restart it. But while she's there, she spots something disturbing. A message etched into the glass that reads, "Help," along with a bloody earring lying beneath a ladder. The earring looks exactly like the one Megan was wearing in the photo Howard showed her. Shaken, Michelle tells Emmett about her discovery, suspecting that Howard might have done something to Megan. Upon closer inspection, Emmett recognizes the girl in the photo, not as Megan, but as Brittany, a classmate of his sister who went missing years ago. A second photograph falls from the book, showing Howard and Brittany dressed in the same clothes that Michelle now wears, standing together in the bunker. Realizing the danger they're in, Michelle and Emmett decide to plan an escape. They quietly start gathering materials. Michelle cuts a makeshift biohazard suit from a shower curtain, and Emmett constructs a homemade gas mask. Their plan is to take Howard's gun, tie him up, and then one of them will go for help. One evening, while playing a game of charades, they almost give themselves away when Howard starts suspecting that something is off. A few days later, Howard calls them into a room and shows them a barrel of hydrochloric acid, which he claims is for waste disposal. He then accuses them of plotting against him, revealing the tools they had hidden for their escape. Furious, Howard dissolves the tools in the acid as Michelle and Emmett look on, horrified. Trying to protect Michelle, Emmett takes the blame for the attempted escape, admitting that he used the tools to try and make a weapon. Howard, seemingly accepting Emmett's apology, coldly shoots and kills him. Shocked and heartbroken, Michelle watches as Howard calmly reassures her, promising that no one will ever harm her again. He begins taking care of her, offering her ice cream and talking about how they'll create a happy life together in the bunker. Determined to escape, Michelle rushes to finish her biohazard suit while mourning Emmett. But one night, Howard discovers the suit hidden among her belongings. Michelle manages to slip past him, but Howard catches up, scolding her for her ingratitude. In a desperate move, Michelle knocks over the barrel of acid onto Howard, causing a fire to break out in the bunker. She grabs her biohazard suit as a severely injured Howard tries to attack her, but she traps him under a heavy shelf and makes her way to the exit. By now, the bunker is engulfed in flames. With the fire spreading, Michelle crawls through the ventilation shaft, dodging Howard's attempts to stab her through the vent grates. She reaches the air filtration room and quickly dons her biohazard suit. Using a can of nitrogen, she freezes and breaks the lock on the outer door, finally escaping the bunker. Outside, Michelle heads toward a car, but tears her suit in the process. Panicking, she seals the rip with duct tape she finds in the vehicle. Just as she's about to relax, she notices a flock of birds flying freely overhead. Realizing that the air isn't toxic, Michelle removes her gas mask, but before she can celebrate, she spots an alien spaceship hovering in the distance, behaving almost like a living creature. As Michelle watches in horror, the bunker explodes behind her, drawing the attention of the alien ship. She frantically searches for the car keys but can't find them. She runs to the car of the woman who had tried to get into the bunker earlier, but the car alarm goes off, alerting the alien. Terrified, Michelle hides in a nearby shed, where she finds the corpse of the infected woman. Searching the body, Michelle locates the car keys just as the alien creature begins investigating the shed, trying to force its way through the animal door. Taking advantage of the alien's distraction, Michelle sprints toward Howard's house, but as she reaches it, the alien ship flies overhead, releasing a poisonous gas. Michelle quickly puts on her gas mask and survives the chemical attack. She hides in the car, but the alien begins probing the vehicle, testing its defenses. When it becomes clear that the car is too difficult to breach, the alien ship lifts the vehicle into the air. Inside the car, Michelle finds a bottle of flammable liquid and a lighter. She quickly makes a Molotov cocktail and throws it into the alien ship's mouth-like opening. The resulting explosion destroys the alien, and the car crashes to the ground. Michelle survives the fall, climbs out of the wrecked vehicle, and drives away in the woman's car. While driving, she tunes the radio and hears news reports of humanity's victories over the alien invaders. There are instructions for survivors to evacuate and a call for those with medical training or combat experience to head to Houston. As Michelle stops to listen to the full message, she notices a sign pointing toward Houston. She drives in that direction, determined to help, and as lightning flashes, she glimpses an even larger alien ship looming in the sky. The film may not be a masterpiece, but the team's skillful execution is undeniable. The script draws you in gradually, raising unsettling questions about who can truly be trusted. In the future, a time comes when women are offered a unique opportunity to conceive and give birth to a child using mobile artificial wombs in the form of eggs. Don't say a bob, say a baby. You're completely tuned to the odd, near-future scenario. A young woman wakes up in her apartment. Her home AI immediately activates the coffee maker and informs Rachel of the good news about the improvement in her digestive health. It suggests an appropriate outfit for the day and reminds her of her visit to the capsule center. Rachel wakes up her husband, Elvie, to wish him a good morning and say goodbye before heading to work. The AI now advises Elvie on his outfit for the day and informs him that his happiness index has slightly increased. He receives a prepared breakfast and heads to the home greenhouse. Meanwhile, Rachel arrives at work, where today there is a presentation of a new generation of cognitive assistants called our machines, which are soon to become new cognitive supervisors. After the meeting, Rachel is invited by her supervisor, who is concerned about the possibility of her expanding her family, as they intend to offer her a promotion. Additionally, the corporation is willing to provide funding for the services of the Uterus Center, which Rachel appreciates. Following this, Rachel continues her workday when she receives a call from the Uterus. There have been changes in their lists, and a spot has opened up which the center can offer her. They schedule a visit, and Rachel settles into a relaxing chair, dreaming about her future child. During this time, her husband conducts a class in the botanical garden, where he shows students a fig fruit that he managed to grow naturally. He offers the young people a taste, but they view the fruit with disgust. Finally, one brave soul tries it. Meanwhile, Rachel shares the joyful news with her colleague and friend Alice and confesses that she hasn't told her husband about her visit to the center. Because of this, she has to consult her robot psychoanalyst, to whom she admits that her husband is very distant from her, as he is fixated on the natural world, which translates into his desire to have a child conceived, carried, and born naturally. The AI seeks an answer to the question of why this child would be considered natural, while one gestated in a capsule would not. What distinguishes them? And Rachel is at a loss, unable to find the differences. Later, she and her friend go out for lunch, and while inhaling the pleasant aromas, Rachel agrees that she should talk to her husband about everything. She finds her husband watching a relaxing program, and he talks about his day. Elvie is disheartened by the fact that the younger generation doesn't know how to interact with nature because no one taught them. At some point, people decided that nature was just a commodity, and that's when everything began to fall apart. The next day, Rachel goes to the Uterus Center, where she and others discuss how, when the birth rate dropped to 0, their newly established center took on the task of solving the problem. Women didn't want to have children because it was inconvenient for them. The center wants them to live full lives and pursue their dreams without being distracted by children. The director of the center, Linda, welcomes the gathering and is ready to share the latest technological advancements. Humans have always managed to control nature, so why shouldn't women take control of childbirth? Linda gives a tour of the center, showing the capsule developed by scientists in which the baby grows. If parents don't have time to interact, they can always play music, audiobooks, or educational podcasts for the baby. Through an app, they can feed the child and monitor its development. One significant advantage is that children in the capsule are not exposed to viruses or toxins. The capsules operate autonomously for 48 hours. The fetus inside can hear everything happening around, so it's advisable for the mother to talk to the baby. After the discussion, Linda reminds Rachel of the need to make a deposit, but Rachel intends to talk to her husband first. Upon returning home, she confesses her intention to Elvie to have a child with the help of the Uterus Center, which upsets him. Not only did she make such an important decision on her own, but she also went to the center without him. Rachel apologizes, and the couple reconciles. Rachel suggests to Elvie that they talk to Alice and her husband, and the family goes to visit them. Alice enthusiastically discusses the opportunity for women to have a child without experiencing pain, suffering, or body changes. Meanwhile, her husband demonstrates a special belt for carrying the egg capsule, to which Elvie looks quite skeptical. He categorically refuses to hold the capsule. At home, he can't shake the feeling that the egg is made of plastic. Rachel assures him that the child will perceive it as a real maternal womb, but Elvie remains unwavering. It's hard for him to accept that the child will be packaged in plastic. The wife suggests that he visit her robot psychotherapist. Although he initially takes offense at this advice, he eventually decides to go. However, after listening to the AI's advice, the man realizes that they completely misunderstand each other. Upon returning home and discussing the evolution that led humanity to grow children in capsules, he agrees to his wife's proposal because he understands how important it is to her. The next day they go to the center, and although now a child can be made from any material, Rachel announces that Elvie will be the biological father. She allows nature to determine the child's gender. Linda leads them to a room where on a large screen, future parents can witness the moment of conception. Later, they are brought a container with a fertilized zygote so they can admire it. The couple later informs Rachel's parents about the upcoming event. Rachel's father suggests that Elvie sell his countryside house since they never go there, but the man vehemently opposes the idea. While the capsule remains at the center, the future parents continue their usual lives. The day comes when the program connects Rachel to the capsule, and even though nothing can be heard from inside yet, she starts selecting music for the baby. At one point, she tries to see the baby, but she is told that it is kept in complete darkness until 7 weeks. Then one of the capsules sends a signal. It's time for birth. Even though everything is programmed, the baby doesn't always arrive at the appointed time. Soon Rachel starts having strange dreams, which she confides to her psychoanalyst, but the AI convinces her that dreams are unreliable material for analysis. After 6 weeks of pregnancy, when the baby's heartbeat is detectable, Linda allows them to take the capsule home. For the first time, she shows them the baby. On that day, Rachel prepares the kids' room, and Elvie brings an olive tree sapling. However, his wife suggests replacing it with a hologram, and the offended husband takes the tree away, promising to plant it in their countryside house, which Rachel once again suggests selling. She just doesn't understand why they should go somewhere when they have everything for a good life here, but Elvie refuses to raise the child among plastic. The next day, Rachel meets a pregnant woman in the pool who allows her to listen to her baby's movements, filling her with delight. In the evening, she moves the capsule to their bedroom because they want to spend as much time as possible with the future child. However, Elvie feels uncomfortable with intimacy while the baby is present, so they move the capsule to baby's room. It immediately signals hunger, and the parents rush to feed their offspring. Sometime later, they go on a tour to the center to prepare for parenting. Linda shows prospective parents the play areas where children play and answers their questions. The government no longer funds education, but the center teaches programming and logic to the little ones. In one of the rooms, children engage in creative activities, or rather, a computer does the work, and the children provide feedback. One of the parents asked about the dreams the children have, but Linda reassures him. Dreams are excluded from the fetal development program because they do not carry any useful information. One day, Elvie is in his greenhouse when he hears the capsule's signal. He feeds the baby, but then decides to communicate with it, while Rachel receives a warning about her declining productivity. Her husband is trying on the capsule holder and takes pride in his success. Now he carries the capsule with him, reading books to the baby, posing riddles, showing his plants, and falling asleep beside it. At work, he suggests to the visitors to hug a tree and experience its calming effect on the human mind. His supervisor congratulates him on the upcoming joyful event and suggests replacing the live plants in the greenhouse with holographic images, as growing real trees is too expensive, but Elvie becomes furious and rejects the proposal. At home, the family watches a movie about penguins, and the man starts crying when he learns about the dedication of the birds. Worried, Rachel suggests returning the capsule to the center, as other parents do. That's when Elvie reveals that he brought the capsule to work. Rachel shares this with her colleagues. She is concerned about her husband's close interaction with the egg. However, the women encourage her to be happy about it. After all, the father is immediately bonding with the future child. Rachel continues to have strange dreams, and her pregnant friend reassures her that it's normal for expectant mothers. One day, Rachel dreams of herself with a baby bump, and she enjoys it. The woman also begins to devote all her attention to the capsule, especially after Elvie's mother sent them an old book about the benefits of parental closeness. But this starts to worry Rachel, and the couple goes to a psychoanalyst. Finding a balance is challenging because everything revolves around the child. Rachel is jealous of Elvie because he spends more time with the baby than she does. After all, she is the mother and should feel the baby. After listening to their argument, the AI asks for permission to connect to the capsule because it cannot take sides. The next day, Rachel takes the capsule to work. However, she behaves distractedly, giving the baby too much attention. Alice suggests placing the egg in a specially designated area where other future mothers' capsules are stored because Rachel is becoming a distracting mother. Alice's capsule is kept at the center because it's more convenient for her. In the evening, Rachel, taking the capsule, hurries to the center for a parenting seminar, after which Linda suggests leaving the baby in the incubation area. The family reluctantly complies with the demand. The house becomes empty, and both the husband and wife miss their capsule. One day, Rachel dreams of a seaside where she walks with the baby in her arms. She wakes up in tears and moves Elvie's little tree to the kids' room, surprising her husband. Meanwhile, at work, her boss is not entirely satisfied with her productivity, but Rachel assures her that everything is fine. Later, Linda informs them that the delivery day will be next Wednesday, as deliveries now occur on the 39th week. They can't afford babies being born earlier or later, as the capsules are in high demand. Parents must receive oxytocin, the love hormone, to prepare for the baby's arrival. However, the family shocks the director with a request to allow them to take the capsule home before delivery, even though it goes against the rules. Moreover, important personality development seminars are held every day. Linda suggests they take special tablets to regulate the baby's sleep, which greatly helps parents. The couple leaves, passing through protesting women against the capsules. Suddenly, Elvie returns and, taking advantage of the midwife being occupied with another patient, retrieves his capsule without permission. That night, Rachel dreams that she is buying her baby at a store, and they offer her a deal, 2 for the price of 1. Upon waking up, she wakes her husband and asks him to take her to their countryside home to give birth in nature. Elvie rushes to the center and informs Linda that they intend to give birth at home. However, the director is strongly against it. The capsule is very expensive and they cannot take risks, so they must return the egg as soon as possible. Nevertheless, the family leaves for their coastal home. Rachel enjoys the surrounding nature, starting to understand her husband. They walk in the forest together and plant an olive tree. They often sit by the sea with the capsule until one night it turns off. In a panic, Rachel suggests calling the center, but her husband reminds her that they still have 48 hours and they must trust the child. They are awakened by the onset of labor, requiring a code to be entered, but they can't figure it out. So LV grabs a hammer. He opens the capsule and retrieves a beautiful, healthy baby. The happy parents embrace him. Early in the morning, Rachel puts the capsule in a box, takes it to the post office, and sends it back to the center. She then returns home where her husband and son are sleeping on the bed. The creators of the film portrayed the absurdity of a possible social evolution quite delicately. Nothing terrible happened. People just became so lazy that they forgot about the joys of life. Why go out of town when you can visit a capsule garden where you lie down and inhale the scents of the forest? And why go through the process of pregnancy and subject your body to stress? After all, there's the capsule. Physics professor Jason Desson's morning begins as usual. An alarm clock rings, he checks his high school son Charlie's homework, and makes coffee for his beloved wife Daniela. The woman is in a hurry and grateful for the attention. However, she is adamantly against letting Charlie drive. Despite this, Jason trusts the boy with the car, and they nearly have an accident. The father calms his son and suggests he confess his feelings to a girl he likes. Meanwhile, Jason receives a call from his friend, Ryan, who is eager to share some good news. He has received a very prestigious scientific award and invites Jason to celebrate that evening. Later, Jason heads to the university, where he tries to explain the essence of Schrödinger's thought experiment to his students. He draws a cat locked in a box on the board. Inside the box, there's also a vial of poison, a radioactive atom, and a Geiger counter. If the atom does not decay, the cat survives. But if it does, the Geiger counter will detect radiation, the vial will break, and the cat will die. All this illustrates the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, which posits that until the box is opened, the atom is in a state of superposition, undetermined. The lecture is interrupted by a phone call, and Jason watches as the students hurriedly leave without hearing that the cat is simultaneously alive and dead. Later, Jason enters a dark room, records the day's events in his notebook, and injects himself with dark matter. The scene shifts to the family kitchen, where Jason and Daniela are preparing dinner. Charlie teases his parents for kissing too often. Then messages from Ryan, who has been waiting at the bar for a while, arrive. Daniela insists that her husband should go meet his best friend. Jason relents and heads to the bar. Ryan is delighted by his arrival and orders Daniela's favorite drink, which the bartender notes is the last bottle. Ryan introduces his colleagues to Jason and unexpectedly offers him a position in his new consciousness research lab. There's one catch: the Center for Neuropsychology will be in San Francisco, and Jason is unsure if his family will want to move from Chicago. He promises to think about it and heads home, but on a dark street he is suddenly stopped by an armed man in a mask. Jason is ready to hand over everything valuable he has, but the robber seems interested in something else. He puts Jason in the car, calling him by name, and orders him to comply. Along the way, the robber unlocks his phone, knowing the password, and asks questions about Ryan. Soon they arrive at a deserted building where the robber orders Jason to undress. He complies, but still decides to attack the assailant. However, he receives a heavy blow to the head and immediately feels an injection in his neck. The robber tells him to put on different clothes and warns that Jason is being given a new opportunity. He should remember this thought because now he will have everything he ever dreamed of, and he's doing this for both of them. When Jason asks who the robber is, he's told it's better not to know. Jason's consciousness fades. He regains consciousness in a hospital ward. He is examined and sent to a shower stall. Eventually, Jason comes to his senses in an unfamiliar bedroom. He tries to leave, but the doors are locked. Suddenly, a woman he doesn't recognize enters, behaves as if she knows him well, and introduces herself as Amanda. She informs him that his body is clean and he is no longer in quarantine. Jason doesn't understand what is happening, but no one answers his questions. The second person Jason sees is Layton, with whom he once worked a long time ago. Layton congratulates him on his triumph and calls him the chief scientific officer. Then, the blinds open and numerous colleagues applaud Jason, welcoming back the only one who returned. He has been absent for 14 months and 10 days, and they all want to hear about his journey. Confused, Jason begins to talk about the meeting at the bar and the strange robber, but his patience runs out because he doesn't know the people around him and doesn't understand what's happening here. Layton announces that he must stay here overnight. However, Jason pushes him away and starts to run. He manages to reach the exit, where a security guard calls him by name and helps open the door. Jason flees the premises despite being pursued. He manages to catch a taxi, gives his address, and heads home. But upon entering, he finds his home changed beyond recognition. At the same time, in another reality, the new Jason returns from the bar and sees his upset wife Daniela. He embraces her, tells her about Ryan's offer, and reminds her of his long-ago choice to marry her, not a cold sterile laboratory. The wife thaws and kisses her husband, unaware that this man is actually not her Jason. In another world, the first Jason meets Amanda in his home instead of his wife and son, who says they live there together. Jason does not believe this and begins to look for traces of his son, but Charlie's room looks completely different. Now it is Jason's own office, filled with awards for outstanding achievements and discoveries he has received over the years. He tries to call his wife Daniela, but the number is unavailable. Jason roams around the house trying to understand what is really happening. Meanwhile, Amanda makes a phone call, asking to handle the matter herself, but Jason sees a car with security arriving at the house and flees. In another reality, Daniela leads her husband into the bedroom and notices a wound on his arm. However, he assures her that she would not believe the truth and kisses her. Meanwhile, Jason 1 rushes to the bar he was at the night before, but the bartender refuses to recognize him, although the man calls him by name and reminds him of his favorite drink. Jason insists, but the bartender kicks him out, advising him to check his head. Then Jason goes to the hospital, where he undergoes a brain tommogram and is given sedatives. He constantly remembers Daniela and tries to find his wedding ring. At the same time, Jason 2 wakes up next to Daniela, kisses his wife, and surveys the kitchen, trying to find coffee. Simultaneously, the first Jason comes to and sees a doctor in front of him who tells him about the results of his tests. The fact is that an unknown psychoactive substance has been found in his blood, but according to all other indicators, he is completely healthy. At his request, they tried to find his family, but there is no one in Chicago with such names. The doctors also checked his file. The woman lists his achievements in science, which Jason himself does not remember, and she informs him that he had been missing for more than a year, and they would like to know where he was. Jason 1 himself checks his information and still finds Daniela, but under her maiden name. In this world, she continues to pursue painting, and her exhibition is supposed to open just today. At this time, Amanda, Layton, and a security officer discuss the situation. The woman suggests calling the police. However, Layton opposes the idea and the security officer suggests checking the hospital. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Jason steals a white coat and walks out into the hall where he sees the familiar security officer. He manages to avoid the encounter and leave the hospital. Jason 2 arrives at the university and, apologizing for his tardiness, continues the lecture. Jason 1 arrives at the exhibition hall. Hearing his name, the man is freely admitted inside, where he examines a modern installation. Later, he sees his own portrait among the displayed paintings and finds Daniela. He embraces her and tries to ask about Charlie, but the woman doesn't know who that is. Moreover, she is constantly being congratulated, and she introduces Jason as the inspiration for her success. Ryan arrives, very surprised by Jason's appearance, as there had been many varied rumors about his disappearance. The man is upset with Jason because he did a lot for him and Velocity. Hearing the company's name, from which he recently escaped, Jason begins to ask questions, but then Daniela starts a speech, which includes questions about unfulfilled dreams. Everyone was asking what he could have been and advises remembering the other doors he could have entered. At the same time, in another world, Jason 2 listens to Daniela's stories about her work plans and gives advice to his son, which surprises his wife. Simultaneously, Jason 1, Ryan, and Daniela from the new world discuss plans. Jason suddenly proposes a hypothesis about a scientist, married to the woman of his dreams, who once went to a bar where he met an old friend who had received a prestigious award. But on the way back, he was attacked, and when he woke up, everything around him had changed. A brain check revealed no abnormalities, only an unknown substance was found in his body. For a practical joke, it was too elaborate, and he had not gone mad. Jason asks to explain how he inspired Daniela's creativity, and she reminds him that once he came to her and said that theoretically people exist in millions of parallel realities, and his decision to part with her was his biggest mistake in this world. Then he talked about some secret project and warned that they would not see each other again. Then Jason starts to describe their life together with their son, causing Ryan's anger and Daniela's tears. He describes his friend's achievements in his own world, but he leaves. At the same time, Jason 2 mixes up toothbrushes, causing his wife's confusion. And Jason 1 receives permission to spend the night in Daniela's guest room, and looking around he finds an elastic band, which he wraps around his ring finger, mimicking a wedding ring. Meanwhile, Jason 2 perplexes his wife with unusual tenderness and examines the photographs on the walls of the house, after which he calls Ryan and declines his offer to work in San Francisco. At this time, Jason 1 calls Amanda and tells her that he is going to the psychiatric hospital. The woman heads there, but it turns out to be a ruse that Jason used to lure her out of the house, and now he and Daniela are inspecting his home together. The man points to a photo, but in his world they are depicted as a family in it. He talks about a son who is as talented as his mother, and Daniela admits that after he left her, she got rid of the child. Jason doesn't believe this, as everything was different, but Daniela insists that in her world, that's exactly what happened. People cannot understand why their memories differ so much, but the woman starts to believe his stories. Later, he finds records of his double from this world and realizes that he made a great discovery in quantum physics. Jason 2 created a more voluminous version of the container where a person was put into superposition and gained the ability to move between multiple realities. It turns out that his double, Jason 2, moved to his world and sent Jason 1 to his dimension, to this world. So Jason is one person, living in reality until the question of marrying Daniela came up. When the first Jason chose his family, the second left Daniela. Their universes split, and the second Jason gave himself to science and invented the container. They switched worlds, but why? Later, Daniela admits that she is glad he appeared, and he explains the rubber band on his hand as a desire to preserve the marriage and return to his wife. He talks about their life there, in another reality, and admits that they were happy. Daniela kisses him, but at that moment, someone knocks at the door. They go to open it, and a security officer from the company Velocity, from which Jason had escaped, bursts into the house. He asks not to use weapons, but the woman shoots Daniela, and the last thing Jason sees is her blood-covered face. This is the first 2 episodes of a new series from Apple TV titled Dark Matter. At night, Leighton informs Amanda about what happened, and she rushes to the center where Jason has been taken. Leighton, in the meantime, apologizes to the tied-up Jason. He couldn't imagine his friend was so unstable and cannot release him yet. Jason, shocked by Daniela's murder, does not want to talk about his supposed genius invention. Jason 2 invites Daniela 1 to a cafe. She is surprised by her husband's behavior, but likes this new Jason. Moreover, they have a dinner planned for close friends the next day, something their family hasn't done in a long time. In a parallel reality, a detective visits Leighton, surprised by yet another disappearance of an employee from their lab. Before this, Blair and a couple of junior employees also vanished. Leighton pretends to know nothing. The detective goes to Amanda. Later, Amanda expresses her displeasure. She is very upset with Don's behavior, while the boss reminds her of the millions spent. If everything comes out, the project will be shut down. They don't understand what happened to Jason, who decides to play along with the colleagues and asks for help in remembering everything. Leighton takes him to a hangar where a huge metal box stands. Jason recalls trying to create a small Schrodinger's box once, but Leighton convinces him that he managed to make a huge box that can easily fit several people. Only Jason knows how it works. The man steps inside, but there are no panels or screens. Recording devices don't work either. Jason is told about the missing people and then shown footage of him emerging from the box. Jason 2 takes Charlie to a store, buys him an expensive skateboard, surprising his son with generosity, and then questions him about the family friends coming to dinner tomorrow. In a parallel reality, Amanda tells Jason 1 that she works as a psychiatrist in the lab, and they have been living together for over a year. Before he disappeared, he met with his ex-girlfriend and then just vanished. Jason suddenly suggests he might not be who she thinks he is. Amanda leaves completely puzzled. Meanwhile, in the parallel reality, Jason 2 welcomes the guests. He keeps conversations going, displaying knowledge of everyone's lives gleaned from social networks, and talks with his son. Jason 1 tries to answer Leighton's questions, who begins to suspect him of being an imposter. The man is beaten, forced to reveal the whereabouts of their Jason, but he knows nothing and cannot explain how the container works. Leighton asks him to strain his memory, as there might be a way to reach a world where cancer is cured. However, all is in vain. Daniela thanks her husband for the wonderful evening. She hasn't seen him like this in a long time, and he seems completely changed. At the same time in the parallel world, Ryan is thrown into Jason's room, horrified to learn of Daniela's death, as he was the one who told Layton that Jason went to her. Ryan had created a drug for Jason that changes the chemical composition of the brain's cortex, temporarily putting some parts to sleep. Jason admits he is not the Jason Ryan knew in this world. The drug creates a special effect that, combined with the container, allows for traveling between worlds. Layton's men take Ryan away. Meanwhile, in the parallel world, Jason too tells his wife he nearly died under the wheels, prompting him to reassess his life and express his gratitude for her presence. In the neighboring world, Amanda enters Jason's room, ordering him to follow her as she intends to get him out of there. They walk through the corridors but encounter a guard who raises the alarm. Jason and Amanda run to the container. They are chased, but Jason closes the iron door, cutting off Dawn's fingers. Amanda injects both herself and Jason with the drug that aids in transferring. Jason too, in the meantime, reviews family archives and finds a birth certificate of another son, Max. In an alternate world, Jason 1 and Amanda find themselves in a dark corridor with many doors. Layton, angered by their disappearance, enters the container himself. Jason and Amanda proceed through the corridor, but all doors look the same. The man suggests the doors lead to other worlds. They step out into one and find themselves on the street of a dead city. There is ash and smoke everywhere. They look around and notice a house in front of them starting to crumble. They rush back to the container, barely making it. Coughing, Amanda shows a case with the remaining doses of the drug, 48 in total. According to the coordinates, the container stands in the same place as in her world, meaning only the external world changes. They inject themselves again and head to the next reality. Layton also enters the corridor, searching for the pair, but without success so far. Jason too attends a lecture in place of his double, but realizing the students are uninterested, he leaves the auditorium, announcing his resignation. Jason 1 and Amanda step into another world and find themselves in a forest. They continue and enter a reality without an atmosphere after a nuclear explosion. The woman's nerves give way, but Jason explains it's a multiverse where everything that could happen did happen. They will soon need food and water, so they must find a habitable world. He opens another door, and the pair end up in the Velocity facility, witnessing Layton and Dawn killing their doubles. Jason manages to push Amanda into the container and close the doors. Later, they open the next doors but find dead worlds everywhere. Exhausted, Amanda rushes through the first door she sees, with Jason hurrying after her. They find themselves in the midst of a snowstorm. The woman loses consciousness from the cold. Jason searches for a bunker but sees a house nearby. He breaks a window, carries Amanda inside, wraps her in a blanket, and lights a fire in the fireplace. Meanwhile, Jason too visits Layton in his world. Here too, he is rich but spends his time idly. Jason offers him to become his investor in a very unusual venture. In the snowy world, Jason 1 steps outside and sees a completely frozen city. Jason 2 takes Layton 2 to a bunker and offers him the substance. Jason 1 returns to the house, finds a family photograph of the owners, and remembers his own family. His wife pulls out a photo of their second son, who is no longer there. Amanda, warming up, learns that the container is buried in snow and finding it is impossible. She recalls being stuck in a snowstorm. Jason suddenly realizes this might have triggered their arrival in the frozen world. Perhaps they can choose where to move. Jason too shows Layton to the container and promises to show him the path not taken. Instantly, the corridor with doors appears before them. Amanda and Jason, armed with probes, begin searching for the container in the snowdrifts. Suddenly, Amanda realizes that the compass always points in the same direction, indicating the container's approximate location. They head that way and soon find the box. In the neighboring universe, Daniela and Charlie walk to the memorial tree. Simultaneously, Jason starts telling Amanda about his second son. Daniela recounts the same story to Charlie. Once, Jason and Daniela were thrilled to learn they were expecting twins, but Max had a weak heart and died. They planted a tree, mixing their son's ashes with the soil. Every birthday, they sit under it and remember the boy. Layton too, meanwhile, is delighted by what he sees. Jason tells him about his life in the world where Layton was his research partner. The tycoon agrees to fund his work. Jason 1 narrates his abduction to Amanda. He doesn't understand why his double went to such lengths. After questioning him about his life, Amanda suggests that the double simply wanted to fix Jason 1's life, making him happy while also taking what he himself lacked, a family. Daniela and Charlie discuss their father's strange behavior, but then Jason too arrives, congratulates his son on his birthday, and gives him car keys. To his stunned wife, he confesses he quit his job but assures her not to worry about money as he has returned to science and already found a sponsor. She can pursue her passion for painting. Jason 1 and Amanda experiment in front of the next door. Jason tries to set a mood, outlining the conditions for the next world. Everything should be peaceful and beautiful, but opening the door, the pair end up in water. The city is flooded. With great difficulty, they close the container door. Amanda asks him to analyze his feelings, and Jason thinks he understands the mistake, but the woman is convinced that lying won't work here. Later they rest, reminiscing about their loved ones. Amanda admits she loves special candies, but they don't exist in Jason's world. The woman reveals that the first to test the container was Engineer Blair, followed by 2 volunteers. Soon the drug's effect wears off. Amanda opens the door and the pair find themselves in the Velocity basement. Initially, they want to escape, but hunger takes over. They look around, but the cafeteria is closed and the elevator doesn't work. Amanda recalls a protocol designed for such a situation. They find a bedroom with someone lying under a blanket, but it's a shriveled body. It becomes clear that something terrible happened in this world. As they prepare to return to the container, a person with a gun stops them, but upon closer inspection, Amanda recognizes Blair. After joyful embraces, Jason tells Blair everything that happened. In his world, he knows her as his wife's friend, but there, she works as a lawyer. Blair leads them to a habitable area and offers them food. She arrived here 3 months ago when nothing worked. She managed to start the generators and access the system, discovering that Earth was overrun by creatures that devoured all living things. She went outside for food and saw the dead world. Blair also has drug vials but is not yet ready to leave. Jason 2 and Layton continue to explore the bunker. They compare their worlds, finding similarities and differences. Jason 2 explains that money varies between worlds, and carrying it is dangerous. One must be careful and honest. Blair reminds Amanda that Jason belongs to another world, so she must decide where she wants to be without considering him. Blair refuses to join them, not ready to re-enter the container. Layton, having visited the first world, is thrilled. Jason is ready to let him go, believing he has prepared him. Blair gives the pair her diary, describing the world she saw. Unfortunately, she has few vials left. Jason and Amanda leave. In the corridor, Amanda suddenly cries. Jason 2 ruined lives, knowing how to use the container. Jason 1 consoles her. Emboldened, Layton promises Jason 2 $1 million for the next doses of the drug. Jason 1 decides to write in Blair's diary what he wants to see behind the next door. He thinks the method worked, and they finally arrived in his world. But stepping outside, they notice unusual emptiness. They manage to open a car and drive to his house. The door is opened by a haggard Daniela. She says Jason was taken to the hospital and the deceased, Charlie, lies in his room. The man runs outside, encountering a medical patrol. A female doctor goes inside, while another doctor performs a rapid test on Jason. The returning doctor says hospitals are full, and Daniela is better off dying at home. The end is near. The virus spreads through body fluids, so Jason should avoid touching Daniela. She gives him several morphine injections, advising him to ease his wife's passing. Amanda tries to keep him from entering the house, reminding him that this is not his world and not his wife. But Jason returns. They reminisce about good moments that turn out to be very similar in both worlds. Then the woman takes the syringe. Jason and Amanda return to the container. The woman reminds him that they were talking about Jason's mother's illness. That's why they ended up in a world dying from a pandemic. The pair continues on. They arrive in a world that, at first glance, doesn't differ from Jason's. Meanwhile, Jason 2 apologizes to his wife for the unilateral decision to buy their son a car. The woman points out that such things are becoming more frequent. Her husband seems to be distancing from her, even missing the gathering at the tree. He tells her about Layton, who will pay huge sums for his discoveries. Jason enters his house, but upon hearing voices upstairs, he grabs a knife from the kitchen. Daniela screams in fear upon seeing him, and Charlie rushes into the room. They both act as if they are mortally afraid of Jason. The woman grabs the phone and tells emergency services that her arrested husband has come to her with a knife. Charlie shouts at him to leave. Frightened, Jason exits the house as a siren sounds in the distance. Amanda takes him to her friend, but the friend is horrified. In this world, Amanda is dead, and the friend mourns her deeply. Amanda tells her that she is in a better world and then takes the car keys. They drive to the container. In Jason 2's world, the container opens, and he steps out, retrieving backpacks with drugs. A lab assistant who rushes out tells him about his double's appearance and his escape with Amanda. Jason 2 returns to the corridor, where he hands doses to Layton. He then informs him that he will have to seal this world. Daniela from Jason's original world starts painting, and her husband's double is thrilled, suggesting she leave the gallery and focus solely on painting, especially since the deal with Leighton is sealed. Later he picks up their son and treats him to ice cream with nuts, not knowing the boy is allergic to them. Daniela can't understand how he could forget such a thing. Then she notices injection marks on his arms. In the evening, he uses dental floss, something he has never done, and Daniela becomes increasingly puzzled. Jason 1 and Amanda continue searching for his world, but they keep finding discrepancies. A different door color, a dog's presence, the absence of the memory tree, and similar things. Amanda suggests they rest at a hotel and have dinner at a normal cafe. Over the meal, they laugh a lot and then dance. At night, Jason hugs Amanda but stops, realizing they are not together. Jason 2 visits a psychotherapist who turns out to be Amanda's double. He talks about his relationship with Daniela and the disappointments he has faced. She suddenly reminds him that expectations can be overly high. Daniela complains to her friend Blair about his strange changes, and Blair advises her to keep an eye on her husband. In the evening, Jason asks his wife to wear a new dress and takes her to the gallery where he has hung her painting. Instead of gratitude, Daniela is horrified and asks to be taken home. She is very angry about his unilateral action, which she feels has humiliated her. Jason admits he never really knew her and is trying to make her happy against her wishes. Leaving his wife at home, he drives away, unaware that she is following him. Soon, they arrive at a warehouse where Daniela sees a locker her husband uses. Waiting for him to leave, she takes out a couple of vials lying on the floor. Later, she gives one to Ryan, asking him to analyze the drug. Meanwhile, Jason 1 finds the Daniela of this world. She also runs a gallery but doesn't recognize him during their conversation. Amanda also finds her double, but here the woman is married and has a son. At night, Jason goes to his house and watches his wife embrace his copy. Amanda, in the meantime, describes her ideal world. When Jason returns, a quarrel ensues because Amanda loses faith that they will find his world, as they only have 10 vials left. Ryan accuses Jason 2 of stealing his research, as the drug in his vial is identical to his own. Jason 2 takes his friend to the container. He injects the drug into himself and Ryan ends up in the corridor with doors to other worlds. Realizing he is in a quantum state, he is thrilled. Jason explains how to tune into another reality, and upon opening a door, Ryan sees a fantastically beautiful Chicago. This world is kinder and more progressive because Jason made it so for his friend. He asks for Ryan's phone to take a picture of him and steps back to the door. Ryan realizes this is not his friend. Jason just closes the door, leaving the man in another world. Later, he sees that Daniela is calling Ryan. Then Leighton's men arrive and pack up the container. Sometime later, a detective comes to Jason's house, investigating Ryan's disappearance. The couple tells her about their last encounters with the friend, and Jason 2 suddenly states that Ryan drank a lot, although he never drank alcohol. After this, Daniela shows him the remaining vial and confesses she has been following him. He explains that Ryan made the drug for Jason 2's research because he is reviving his project. Amanda leads Jason 1 into a world she has imagined. This Chicago is beautiful. They walk through a clean and cozy city, enjoying friendly faces. They drink cocoa from edible cups and then have a snack in a cafe where they learn about a trendy restaurant in the tallest tower in the city. Amanda leaves, setting up a meeting with Jason there. A nearby couple gives him a photo they took, admiring them. Later, Jason goes to the restaurant and sees Amanda in an evening dress. She gives him a suit she bought for him, and he changes and joins her. Jason gives her her favorite candies, which exist in this world. She laughs, saying he is an insurance agent here. Her double in this world disappeared 2 years ago. Taking advantage of their identical appearance, Amanda made a passport and gained access to the double's savings, so she decided to stay here. She invites Jason to join her, but he declines. Before leaving, Jason secretly places 2 of the remaining vials in her purse. Amanda cries in the elevator, but, seeing the sun, wipes her tears and heads into a new life. Jason goes to the container. He has only 3 vials left, and the next world is destroyed. He continues, and in the next reality, he calls his wife. She is surprised, as she just saw him off to work, but Jason confesses his love to her. At night, he sneaks into his house and sees Daniela hugging his copy, but going down to the kitchen, he encounters his son, and it is not Charlie. It turns out that here they managed to save Max by transplanting the heart of a deceased girl, and now he suffers from guilt. Jason 1 comforts him. Meanwhile, Jason 2 confesses to the psychotherapist Amanda that he wants to pack up and leave his wife. Then suddenly he tells very personal things about the doctor herself. She kicks him out, but outside, Jason 2 is met by a detective. They tracked Ryan's phone and know that after the bar, he went to the industrial part of the city, so she intends to check all the cameras located there. Jason 2 goes to the container and breaks the formwork. He finds Ryan's double in the first world, where he works as a simple mechanic, gets him drunk, brings him to his world, cleans him up, and puts him to sleep in Ryan's bed. Jason 1 takes out the last vial and writes in Blair's diary his memories of the first meeting with Daniela. He saw the living Max and even thought of treating his double in that world as he had been treated. But he realized he only wants his family, his home, and his life. Jason 1 opens the door and finally arrives in his world. He heads home, checking all the details along the way, but upon approaching the house, he sees himself telling Daniela that he found Ryan in a wild drunken state. He had to clean his friend up and take him home. Jason 1 goes to a store to buy a gun, but without a permit, he buys pepper spray and a hunting knife. A minute later, Jason 2 enters the same store and repeats his double's actions. The stunned shop assistant remarks that they were just discussing buying a gun. She asks if he has a twin brother. Realizing his prototype has returned, Jason 2 runs outside but finds no one. Friends, if you've watched this far, pay closer attention because the most confusing part of the plot is about to begin. He returns home where Charlie informs him that Mom went to Ryan, who is behaving very strangely. Jason 2 goes outside and is attacked by another Jason in a hat, whom he kills in a fight. Meanwhile, Ryan, seeing Daniela, claims that he is an auto mechanic and repairs her car in his world, not a scientist-chemist. He recalls a man offering him alcohol and recognizes Jason from a photo. Jason checks his gear and stepping into the hallway encounters himself, but the double runs away, and Jason gives chase. At this time, Jason 2 loads the body of the killed double into a car, and Jason 1 catches up with his double in a bar. They realize that their copies multiply in a container, and it's unclear how many there could be, but they all aimed for this particular Chicago, as their prototype was desperate to get home. Amanda appeared in all realities. Only in one did she die in a terrible world. And for Jason 1, she remained in the best world. Both are out of vials and cannot help each other. Jason 3 suggests getting rid of the one who caused all this. Jason 2 doesn't know about the place where they both love to rest. They need to lure the villain there and kill him. Besides, Jason 3 has already dug a grave there, and he also has a gun. The next morning, Jason 1 goes to the bar, where he lights a cigar despite the strict prohibition. He is taken to the police station. Meanwhile, Daniela plans to take her husband's large car to move some things to the gallery, but he rudely forbids her. And Jason 2 drives his son to the university, showing him memorable places on the campus, when he notices Jason 3 watching them. Daniela goes to the storage box again and breaking the doors, finds bags with unknown currency, a box of vials, and Ryan's jacket. But then she gets a call from the police. Jason 2 guides Charlie through the building and their pursuer loses sight of them. The father asks his son to take the car and meet him at another exit, even though he doesn't have a license yet. Confused, Charlie leaves, and Jason 2 tries to throw Jason 3 off his trail, but he also knows the university building well. Eventually, the men engage in a fight, and the second Jason wins. Charlie makes a failed maneuver, attracting a policeman's attention, and Jason 2 knocks out the third and locks him in a toilet stall. Meanwhile, the policeman demands Charlie's license, but at that moment, Jason 2 appears, managing to persuade the officer to let them go. At this moment, Daniela sees her husband at the station. It turns out Jason was looking for a place where they could talk safely. He tells his wife the truth, but she doesn't believe him. Then Jason suggests calling him. Daniela dials her husband's number, and Jason answers. She hangs up, then Jason asks her to call again and remind him of their great vacation in Miami, though they never actually went there. Daniela does this, adding made-up details about the vacation, and that Jason agrees, pretending to remember the trip. Now Daniela believes her real husband, who says there are other versions of him. They agree on a code word in a meeting place, and Daniela goes to get their son. But at home she finds her husband, Jason 2, who orders her to pack because they need to leave urgently. The mother tries to talk to her son, but Jason 2 is on guard and doesn't let them do it. The woman leaves supposedly to get a suitcase and messages Charlie. The boy leaves first, and Daniela lures her husband into the basement and pushes him down the stairs. They drive away, but another car with yet another Jason behind the wheel cuts them off. Daniela realizes this is another version of her husband. At this moment, they are rammed by a car driven by yet another Jason. Daniela and Charlie flee. Soon they reach the place where Jason 1 is waiting for them. He says the code word and hugs his son. Meanwhile, Jason's family leaves the city. Suddenly, Daniela and Charlie start receiving messages from numerous other Jasons, assuring them that only they can protect them. The woman turns off the gadgets. Her husband can't choose a place where they can hide, as the other Jasons might also guess where to look for them. Then Charlie takes over and shows the way to a friend's vacant house. Charlie is puzzled by the number of fathers, as, theoretically, they all are his father in some way. Jason suggests they sleep first and then make decisions. Daniela sympathizes with his adventures, but those other Jasons are suffering too. The woman goes to bed, while Jason checks his email and suddenly sees an entire chat of 44 Jasons arguing over who gets Daniela and Charlie. In the morning, Jason finds his wife on the beach. She admits that at first, she liked the new Jason, but gradually she realized he wasn't the one she loved. Her husband tells her he sometimes thought about a new life. Apparently Jason too also thought about this, so he moved to their world. He recalls Daniela number 2, who became an artist, lived in a luxurious apartment, and had lots of friends. Jason 3 also studies the chat, trying to figure out where his double went. Suddenly he gets a message from Blair asking to return the car. He realizes Daniela borrowed a car from a friend and asks her to come urgently. At this time, Jason tells his wife about the chat, and one of them suggesting to raffle her and Charlie in a lottery. Jason too questions the third about what happened to him in other worlds. He tells about the death of Daniela and Ryan and the suffering of Amanda, who loved that Jason very much. In the reality of the third Jason, she died in the forest, impaled by a giant tree branch. Jason too begins to understand the horror of his actions, as he hoped to make his double happy with a new life. Meanwhile, Charlie prepares breakfast and tells Jason the latest news from their life, deciding where to go next. At this time, Blair arrives at their house and finds Jason 3 tied up in a closet. The third attacks her and demands to track her car, but Blair manages to neutralize him and demands to tell her the truth about the ongoing madness. Jason tells his wife and son about other realities. They are amazed that their doubles live in a few microns away, unseen by them. Jason admits that there was one world where he almost stayed but couldn't imagine life without his family. Later, Daniela reads his chat. They spend the night together, reminiscing about their first meeting. She admits she made a choice and informed the other Jasons. But later, Jason suddenly sees a shadow outside the window, and going outside, finds an injured double, who says he was hit by one of them. There are many of them here, and it won't end just like that. Gunshots are heard in the dark, and Jason asks his wife to run to their son, but then another armed double calls out to him, demanding his clothes and the code word. Jason 1 charges at him. A fight ensues, but a shot rings out, and the double falls. It turns out to be Jason 2, who realized his guilt. He asks for their forgiveness, gives them car keys, and asks them to leave. The family drives into the night, while the second Jason shoots back at the other doubles, giving them a chance to escape. Here they find a suitcase with a device for traveling between worlds in the car, and a phone with a recorded message, in which Jason 2 admits that he entered the container full of regret about the world where the family he didn't create lived, and now he offers to find them a new home in another world. The family heads to the container, where they are met by dozens of Jason doubles who understood that the woman made a choice and came to say goodbye. The family walks into the container through the line of Jasons. There, they trust Charlie to choose a new world where they will all be happy. Charlie opens the door and steps into another reality, followed by his parents. This concludes the first season. Hello everyone, today we'll be talking about a fantasy film called Dragon Wars. Be ready for some spoilers ahead. Every 500 years, a woman is born with the spiritual energy to transform a serpent into a celestial dragon. The creature that possesses this power can determine humanity's fate by either destroying or saving the world. Somewhere in the city of Los Angeles, the police are examining the sudden appearance of a giant trail, seemingly caused by a large creature. Ethan is a reporter who's also here to investigate the situation, but the government agents refuse to answer any questions and tells him to leave immediately. However, the man notices something strange as he looks into the field and sees what appears to be a piece of scale buried inside the ground. Apparently, Ethan has seen this before when he was a child, and he begins recollecting the memories as he stares into a strange medallion that he wears. 15 years ago, Ethan went to a local antique store, accompanying his father as the man tries to sell a blade to the store owner named Jack. The boy looks through the items and sees a mysterious box unlocking itself after sensing his presence. The box opens and reveals a giant piece of scale that emanates an aura towards the boy. The store owner perceives this and begins having a heart attack, but when the father tries to call the ambulance, Jack tells the man to buy a medicine from the neighboring shop instead. Ethan's father tells the boy to look after the old man and runs off quickly, but it turns out that Jack faked everything in order to speak to the boy alone. He tells Ethan that there are giant serpents called Imugis that live in the heavens, and every 500 years, one of the serpents is awarded for its good deeds and turned into a celestial dragon. For this to occur, the creature needs a magical object called the Yuyi-Ju, but the evil serpent Viraki and his followers have tried for a long time to steal this item. 5 centuries ago, the heaven decided to hide the Yuyi-Ju by sending it to a city in Korea and guarded by its best warriors Haram and his master Buchan. But the evil serpent also knew the location of this magical item and plans to steal it one day. The local lord's wife gave birth to a girl named Naren, and the one destined to be the holder of the Yuyi-Ju with a giant birthmark on her shoulder. When the girl becomes 20 years of age, the Yuyi-Ju would form inside her, and the evil serpent would appear once again. Naren soon becomes a beautiful woman, and she begins falling in love with Haram, who shares the affection as well. The master shows Haram the good Imugi, who's destined to become a celestial dragon, and the young man looks at the giant creature in shock as it swims inside the waters. Buchan also gives the man the medallion that only the protector of Yuyi-Ju wears, which can protect him from harm if his life is in danger. Eventually, the evil serpent brings all its followers to the village in search for the girl, and the army begins shooting numerous bombs at the people, causing tremendous damage. They charge at the city and kills all the men one by one, as the people are no match for their dragons and magic. They capture all the women and looks through every one of them, trying to find the girl with the giant birthmark on her shoulder. The army soon arrives at the lord's house and kills Naren's father in front of her, causing the girl to run out and mourn for her dying parents. The soldier rips open her clothing, discovering her true identity, and forcefully takes her away from her home. Luckily, the master flies in and fights the army with his magic, giving Haram the chance to save the girl. The two run into hiding, and the man tells Naren the truth about her destiny. The master manages to escape the fight after being wounded, but finds the medallion on the ground with his pupil nowhere in sight. Haram tries to run away with Naren instead of bringing her to the good Imugi, and the evil serpent Viraki chases them closely behind. The creature corners them on a cliff, and the two decide to jump and fall into the oceans, killing themselves in the process. The store owner gives Ethan the protector's medallion and reveals that he's actually the reincarnation of Buchan, and the boy used to be Haram, the warrior that he raised. This is their second chance in fulfilling the prophecy, and the boy must find a girl named Sarah who also has the giant birthmark and bring her to the Grand Cave. After remembering the girl's name, Ethan goes to his friend Bruce and tells him to find the girl, as she's likely to be related to the giant trails. But the friend tells Ethan that they need more details, as there are probably thousands of women in the city with the same name. Meanwhile, Sarah sees the news on TV about the gigantic landmarks and suddenly becomes wary about her safety, running home even without saying goodbye to her friend. She's clearly subconsciously aware of this danger and tries her best to protect herself by looking through a book about ancient prophecies. Her friend Brandy goes to her home and is shocked to see that Sarah has put up numerous paper talismans in the house to ward off evil. The girl tries to comfort Sarah and tells her that she's only imagining the danger. But this doesn't help at all, as she can't shake the instinctual fear inside her heart. Sarah's worry turns out to be valid, as the giant serpent has appeared in the city looking for the Yuyi-Ju, destroying everything on its path. The girl begins having nightmares and waking up at night. She feels an intense pain coming from her birthmark and calls the ambulance to take her to the hospital. Brandy tries to look for her friend after finding out that Sarah was hospitalized, but the nurse refuses to let her visit right now as they pass the visiting hours. With no other choice, Brandy goes to Sarah's house to pack some clothing for her friend, but suddenly feels the ground shaking from the outside. The girl runs out of the house, only to see the giant serpent in front of her and screams in fear. Viraki bites her before she can escape and tosses her into the pool, leaving her to die. The next day, Ethan receives the report that a woman was killed inside a house by what the neighbors claim to be a giant snake. He immediately heads towards the location, fearing that Sarah may have died already. When he arrives at the scene, he realizes that the girl is not the one he was looking for, and learns from the neighbor that Sarah was taken to a hospital before the attack. He rushes towards the location to find the girl, but is stopped at the front desk, who tells him that Sarah was put into quarantine for a wound on her shoulder that may cause infections. Ethan tries to look for another way in, and meets a doctor who's a big fan of the news reporter and helps him find the girl right away. He sees the woman sitting on the bed and tells her that he believes in the danger that she's feeling, and explains that they must leave this place as the monster is nearby. Suddenly, they feel the whole building shake violently as the giant serpent has tracked them to the hospital already. The doctor rushes in and tells the two to leave right away as they're in great danger. Ethan takes the girl towards the exit as the doctor slowly transforms into Jack, who was watching over them from the very beginning. They run to the car driven by Bruce, and the man hits the gas pedal right away after seeing the monster appear in the garage, chasing after them as it destroys everything in sight. They rush out of the hospital and manages to escape quickly as the creature charges out one step behind and roars in frustration towards his prey. Before they can catch their breath, Bruce hits someone with the car and stops immediately. But it turns out that the man is a servant of Baraki and plans to take Sarah back to his master. The two tries everything they can to stop the general, but their attacks are useless against the man's armor. Luckily, the man was hit by a car before the girl was taken, and the driver takes them away quickly from danger. The woman drops off the two after confirming that they're not hurt, and begins transforming back into Jack, showing that the old man continues to help them in their perilous journey. Sarah is confused about everything that's happening, and questions the visions that she keeps on seeing in her dreams, doubting her own sanity. In order to find out about the truth behind her past, Ethan suggests that they go to a psychology professor of his who specializes in extracting repressed memories. He promises to keep her safe as they share a kiss on the beach, but Ethan realizes that her destiny is to die if she's really the holder of the Yuichu. On the other side, the continuous attacks in the city has caught the government's attention, and they begin to suspect that Sarah is somehow responsible for the monster's appearance. The mission leader realizes that they may have to terminate the girl if they're not able to contain the situation, as the creature seems to be looking for her. At the same time, Baraki's general begins summoning more of the serpent's followers and monsters into the world using numerous ancient scrolls, and they prepare to take Sarah by any means necessary. The government manages to track down the location of the giant serpent and sends an army of special forces to terminate the beast. They head inside the cave of the monster and sees the enormous creature appearing in front of them. The soldiers quickly retreat in fear and begin shooting at Baraki, but their attacks are useless as they continue to run from the monster. However, the serpent's army arrives on the other side and forces the soldiers into a corner. The general summons his magic towards the man and destroys them in a single attack. Meanwhile, Ethan's professor is trying to extract the suppressed memories from Sarah's mind, and eventually, the girl begins seeing her childhood and then further into her past life as well. Her spiritual power begins awakening as her memories return, surrounding her in glowing lights as Ethan watches in amazement. Sarah recovers from the experience, but her powers have also alerted Baraki to their location, forcing them to run immediately away from the house. The two drives away quickly as the giant snake destroys the house and chases them close behind, tearing up the entire street in the process. Luckily, they manage to lose the monster in the residential areas, and Ethan calls his friend to arrange a helicopter as he realizes that they can no longer be safe on the ground. They meet up with Bruce in a restaurant, who gives them supplies and tells them that the helicopter is on top of the news building. But the giant serpent manages to locate them once again and begins destroying the entire building to capture the girl. They run quickly away from the building as the monster chases them from behind. Before they can be captured, the police officers fire at the giant creature and distract it long enough for them to escape temporarily. They continue running towards the news building as the monster chases after them, destroying everything on its path and sending cars flying in the air. The people in the city panic and runs in fear while the creature causes numerous explosions, resulting in tremendous damage in the area. The two runs inside the news building and eventually makes it to the rooftop where the helicopter is waiting for them. But the creature has noticed their whereabouts and begins climbing to the roof as well. The helicopter tries to take off, but the serpent launches and grabs onto the aircraft, forcing Ethan to jump out with Sarah before it smashes the carrier through the air and onto the ground. Dark clouds begin covering the sky as Baraki roars in victory and stares directly at the couple, planning to devour them to acquire the power of the heavens. Luckily, they're saved when the US military arrives and begins shooting furiously at the creature with a barrage of missiles and bullets, giving them the chance to escape from the building. The serpent tries to fight back and destroys multiple choppers, but the army's combined firepower manages to knock down the giant beast and sends it tumbling to the ground. They continue to shoot relentlessly as the creature screams in pain, but what they don't realize is that an army of dragon is approaching quickly to the city. The monsters attack the choppers by shooting out multiple fireballs, causing huge explosions as the aircrafts are forced to retreat. The ground troops of the monsters arrive as well and begins launching numerous bombs at the police, causing explosions to engulf the area. The military responds by mobilizing armored vehicles towards the creatures and its army of darkness led by the serpent's general. The two armies march closer towards each other and begins a massive battle as the monsters charge towards the US military. The tank fires at the army and begins killing the creatures, but the enemy also retaliates by shooting numerous bombs at the vehicles, causing tremendous damage. Meanwhile, Ethan manages to escape the building with Sarah, but they run into the government agent who claims to be here to help them and take them away from the chaos. The agents bring them to an underground facility, and the senior officer reveals that he knows about the ancient legend. He plans on killing the girl to end this madness, even if it means that the creatures will come back 500 years later. Before the man can fire the gun, the other agent shoots his partner as he realizes that in order to save humanity permanently, the girl must live. He gives them the car keys and tells Ethan to protect Sarah until they can change the fate of the world. Ethan drives the girl towards the borders and plans to escape into Mexico, but Sarah claims that their actions are useless because Baraki will track her down wherever she goes. Before they can finish their conversation, the dragons attack their car with fireballs, causing them to flip over and crash onto the road. Ethan slowly loses consciousness as the monsters begin surrounding them. When the main character wakes up, he realizes that he's tied up to a pole in the deserts, surrounded by the army of darkness. They bring the girl towards the altar and ties her up to the table, preparing her to be sacrificed to the evil serpent. The general and the army chants Baraki's name as they open the massive door, releasing the monster so that it may devour the girl. The giant serpent moves closer to the woman and towers over everyone, while Sarah screams in fear at the sight of this monstrosity. Ethan screams the woman's name hopelessly, which awakens the medallion on his chest, summoning the thunders from the heavens, which concentrates the energy into a large shockwave that stuns the entire army and turns them into dust. The giant serpent recovers from the explosion and attacks them with anger, knocking Ethan away from the girl. Before he can devour Sarah, another Imugi charges towards it and knocks it to the ground. It carries Baraki by its jaws and throws the monster away from the couple. The two giant monsters roar at each other, and Baraki launches towards the other Imugi, biting its neck and throwing the giant serpent onto the floor. Sarah realizes that she must fulfill her destiny, as it's the only way this whole thing can end. She walks towards the serpents and summons the Yuiju from her body into the sky. Baraki tries to grab the glowing orb, but Sarah sends it the other way and the good Imugi swallows the energy at this opportunity. The evil serpent sees this and begins attacking his foe, but the good Imugi transforms and sheds the skin on his body, finally turning into a celestial dragon. It screams furiously and grasps Baraki, slamming the serpent onto the ground. The monster recovers and begins attacking the dragon once more, but is no match for the celestial creature as it gets thrown to the floor once again. The dragon flies towards the sky and Baraki tries to grab onto its tail, causing both of them to launch into the air. The good Imugi turns around and strikes the serpent by its neck, tossing the monster downwards as it crashes into the ground. The dragon then charges a massive fireball and shoots it right inside Baraki's mouth, causing the serpent to burn from the inside and eventually turn into dust. The dragon flies back towards Ethan and spits out the Yuiju, which causes Sarah's body to evaporate into a glowing aura that fuses with the magical orb. The celestial dragon roars towards the heavens and grabs onto the Yuiju. It then launches towards the sky and slowly vanishes into the clouds, as it sheds tears of sympathy for Ethan's loss. Jack appears behind the man and tells him that he did the right thing, before vanishing as well to the other world. Ethan says goodbye to his master and begins walking towards the desert, into a new future that he's created for mankind. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like my video, please press like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time. In the remote forests of Washington state, a young man tracks and kills a deer. Children of various ages, smeared with black soot, emerge from the forest accompanied by their father, Ben Cash, who announces,
"Today the boy is dead, and in his place is a man."
He then feeds the hunter the liver of the freshly killed animal. The children look proudly at their brother and then joyfully splash in the clear waters of a forest stream, washing off their camouflage. Later, they carry the animal's carcass to their home, nestled deep in the forest. Nearby, there's a greenhouse and outbuildings for storage, with a garden surrounding them. Inside, everything is tidy and organized, with each forest home resident diligently performing their tasks. Later, they gather in a clearing where, after meditation, the father teaches the children self-defense techniques.
You kill her.
Yeah, thank you. Let's try that.
In the evening, the family gathers around a campfire where the children read world classics and scientific literature. The father questions each child about the material, helping them understand everything from advanced mathematics to literary styles, and gives them assignments for the next day. Then he takes out a guitar. Everyone brings their instrument, and soon an improvised melody plays by the campfire, under which the children dance. In the morning, the family goes for their mandatory run along forest trails. Everything seems to follow a well-established routine. Later, the father and his eldest son, Bo, return from a trip to the nearest town for supplies. Unexpectedly, the younger children ask,
"Why does Mommy have to be gone so long?"
She hasn't been gone very long.
It turns out their mother is in a hospital, and the father is going to find out when she can return home. In town, while Ben shops, local girls flirt with Bo. However, he doesn't know what to talk about with them, as his knowledge of political structures doesn't interest them much. So Bo goes to get the mail and finds several letters addressed to him, inviting him to the country's best universities. Meanwhile, Ben reaches his sister, who informs him that his wife Leslie has taken her own life. Returning home, he sits under a forest waterfall for a long time before coming out to the children to announce the tragic news.
Last night, Mommy killed herself.
While everyone weeps, Ben's middle son, Relian, grabs a knife and tries to attack his father, but then directs his blows at a tree, venting his anger. Later, Ben reads his wife's found will, amazed by it. But morning comes, and the family again runs along the forest trail and exercises in the clearing. Suddenly, Relian asks,
"Dad, when's Mom's funeral?"
Ben returns to town and contacts his wife's parents, who blame everything on their former son-in-law, even though they chose this life together. When Leslie got sick, her parents found and paid for the clinic, but nothing helped.
I found her will.
You are not welcome here. I will have you arrested.
However, Leslie's mother informs him that the burial will take place in 5 days. Later, the family discusses what happened. The children understand their grandparents' anger, but cannot allow their mother's will to be disregarded. However, the threat of their father being arrested and them being sent to an orphanage scares them. At night, Ben hears his wife's voice.
What we're doing out here is so incredible. I love you so much.
In the morning, Ben finds all 6 children ready in the yard, wanting to see their mother one last time. He strongly opposes the trip, but the children insist.
Dad, give us the mission.
Mission, rescue Mom!
But Ben reminds them of the upcoming training. Struggling, Relian falls off the cliff and injures his arm, but the father reminds him,
"No one will magically appear and save you in the end."
The children persistently conquer the difficult peak as it starts to rain. Later, they rest at the base of the cliff. On the way home, the father suddenly stops the bus and admits that they cannot go to their mother's funeral because they cannot argue with her relatives. But suddenly, Ben stops his speech and turns on the music.
They set off
Into the big world in their converted bus. Along the way, Ben gives the children a unique tour, showing them America's sights.
Attention all campers. This is your captain speaking.
Later, Ben orders them to search for any game for dinner.
Everyone keep their eyes peeled for deer.
Finding nothing suitable, the family stops for the night. In the morning, they arrive at a bank, and while Ben withdraws money, the children look around in surprise.
What's wrong with everyone?
Are they sick?
Convincing the children that laughing at people is wrong, Ben tells them to return to the bus. Soon, a police officer stops them and asks for documents. Checking the license, he inquires,
No school today.
and goes to inspect the bus. The situation is saved by Bo, who starts reading religious texts and says they are homeschooled. The children sing hymns and the officer hurries away. The bus continues on, but soon they stop to hunt for food. However, the children cannot shoot at domestic animals. The bus drives on. Suddenly, the children start crying, remembering their mother. The girls speak to each other in Esperanto, which angers their father.
No Esperanto. I'm not joking.
The children start communicating in world languages. Soon, Ben has to stop at a cafe, but the menu confuses her.
Cola.
Poison water.
Realizing there is no proper food here, Ben orders the children to leave. He goes to a supermarket and fills the cart with groceries. Suddenly, he grabs his chest and falls to the floor. While concerned shoppers try to help him, the children steal the groceries. Ben regains consciousness and leaves the store. Driving a bit further, the father reviews their actions, and the children analyze the mistakes made during the theft in detail. Finally, Ben presents a stolen cake, as today is the birthday of scientist Chomsky.
Uncle, no, it's the day of your birthday.
After the treat, the father gives all the children useful gifts: a bow, knives, a book on sex education, and arrows. But this angers Relian.
Why can't we celebrate Christmas like the rest of the entire world?
The father doesn't understand why a mythical elf is more useful than a thinker and humanist. He offers his son to share his thoughts and convince him of the correctness of his reasoning. But the boy leaves. The family moves on. Soon they reach Ben's sister Harper's house. The woman is happy to see all her nephews, but their questions surprise her.
How did you kill those chickens? With an axe or a knife?
She tries to find answers and is again astonished that Ben honestly and thoroughly explains even very delicate matters to the children. Harper's husband tries to offer condolences, but Ben calmly reminds him that he couldn't stand his wife. Then he straightforwardly explains the cause of his wife's death. His sister and her husband try to end the conversation. Children shouldn't know the details, but Ben tells the children the real cause of their mother's death.
Probably a form of postpartum psychosis.
Ignoring his sister, who left the table, he pours wine for the children. Later, the children watch with curiosity as their cousins play video games. Ben argues with his sister, who cannot accept such democracy in parenting.
I tell the truth to my kids. I don't lie to my kids.
Protecting children.
Harper believes that not sharing what children cannot understand isn't a lie. Her husband suggests postponing the conversation until morning, and Ben apologizes. Meanwhile, the children take their sleeping bags and set up for the night in the yard, despite having rooms prepared for them. In the morning, everyone gathers at the table, and Ben allows the children to play video games with their cousins. When the children leave, his sister and her husband try to reason with
Kids need structure. They need to go to a real school.
Then Ben calls his nephews and asks them questions about political science and history. The boys can't answer a single question. However, Ben's youngest daughter freely discusses these topics. Relatives are impressed by such knowledge and no longer object to Ben's way of educating his children. The family moves on. They soon stop to rest at a campground where Bo meets a girl. She is surprised by his unusual name, and he explains that his parents made it up.
I'm Claire.
Bodevin. Our names are unique. There's only one of us in the whole world.
In the evening, they continue their acquaintance. The girl is surprised that Bo doesn't know modern pop music but loves Bach and cello suites. He lies that they recently lived in Paris and is amazed at her ignorance. He avoids questions about his mother and, after kissing the girl for the first time, declares his intention to marry her to her mother.
I am ready for you, if you will have me. Will you be my wife?
The mother leads the girl back to the trailer. In the morning, the bus pulls out of the parking lot and Bo waves to the girl and her mother. That day, they reach the church where Leslie's farewell ceremony is held. Relatives and friends mourn the woman when a group in bright clothes enters the church, stunning everyone. The preacher tells about Leslie, and when he mentions her husband, Ben takes the floor and reads his wife's will.
First of all, Leslie practiced Buddhism.
If nothing else, she had a sense of humor.
Leslie's last will and testament.
Finally, she asks to have her ashes flushed down the nearest toilet. Enraged, Leslie's father Jack orders Ben to be thrown out of the church. The children run after him while the preacher continues his sermon. Soon, Leslie's coffin is carried outside. Grandma and Grandpa hug the grandchildren, some of whom they see for the first time. Nevertheless, Jack forbids Ben to go to the cemetery, threatening arrest. Ben orders the children to get in the bus and follows the procession, though the children beg him to stop.
No, I don't want to lose you!
Hearing the last argument, Ben stops the bus. They drive to the suburbs and stop for the night. The man opens a bottle of wine and drinks it, sitting by the bus while his sons go to a sports field and remember their mother. Unexpectedly, Relian declares,
Mom had psychotic episodes. Dad made her crazy. Dad's dangerous.
Upset, Bo returns to Ben and shows him letters from all the universities in America, offering to accept him for study. Suddenly, the father accuses him of lying and secrecy, and Bo confesses, "It was Mom. I just want to go to college. Ben is stunned knowing his son speaks 6 languages, advanced mathematics, and physics. What else can he be taught? But the son becomes furious.
I don't know anything about anything!
Later, he receives a note from his youngest son, who ran away to live with his grandparents. Seeing his father come for him, Relian accuses him of killing his mother.
You killed Mom! I heard you fighting about where we live. Mom wanted to leave.
Ben tries to prove to his son that they made the decision together with Leslie, but the boy is determined to stay with his grandparents. Ben orders him to pack, but the boy shouts insults and runs away. Ben follows, but an arrow lands right next to him. This is Jack stopping his son-in-law.
They're going to be totally unprepared for the real world.
Jack intends to file for custody of the children. Ben refuses to leave without his son, and then Jack calls the police. Ben has to leave. Later, he and the children hide in the dark, watching the grandfather's house. Then they send Vesper to rescue the captive. Unexpectedly, the daughter falls from the roof and crashes. A shocked Ben can't believe it happened. The girl is taken to the hospital. A vertebra is fractured. The doctor is very impressed by her physical condition, but the girl was very lucky. In the morning, Ben brings the children to Leslie's parents' house. He watches them interact with their grandfather. Her mother shows the last letters from her daughter.
We created a paradise out of Plato's Republic. I'm going to get better out here. I know I will.
Later, Ben tells the children they will stay here, but this causes outrage because this house is the opposite of everything he taught them. However, the father, frightened by Vesper's injury, realizes that his entire life was a beautiful mistake.
It was too much. And I knew it. I'll ruin your lives.
Ben unloads the children's belongings from the bus and says goodbye to Jack. He promises to arrange the children's lives in the best way. The man drives away. Sitting behind the wheel, he cries, looking at the empty cabin. Reaching a gas station restroom, he shaves off his long-standing beard. At night, he stops by the roadside, lights a campfire, and suddenly hears a voice.
Shaved your face.
And his children emerge from the bus, having hidden in the luggage compartment. The children want to save their mother and complete the mission, and the father gives in. The family goes to the cemetery and digs up Leslie's coffin, restoring the grave so no one notices the theft. Later, Bo shaves his hair and beard, earning his father's approving smile. Soon the family takes Leslie's coffin to the seaside, where the children build a funeral pyre for her, and after saying their goodbyes, light it under their mother's favorite song. Everyone sings and dances, fulfilling her last wish. Sometime later, they go to the airport to see off Bo, who is flying to Namibia for volunteer work, and also flush their mother's ashes down the toilet according to her will. The father gives his son final advice.
Always tell the truth. Always take the high road. Don't die.
I won't.
Later, the family settles on a farm, raising chickens in their bus. Ben tends to the farm and the children start going to school. The film ends here. Japan 2023. People board a train and head to work. Everyone is busy with their own things, scrolling through Instagram feeds, making acquaintances on social networks, and discussing plans for the evening, unaware that in just a few minutes, their lives will change forever. Suddenly, the train's speed increases, and strange things start happening. A bottle cap rolling on the floor of the carriage suddenly disappears. Passengers begin receiving alerts about powerful earthquakes on their phones. Then the train enters a gloomy tunnel and comes to a sudden halt. People regain consciousness, bewildered by what has happened. One of the passengers opens the entrance doors, and people, screaming and pushing each other, rush to the exit, jumping from the high steps. But once outside, they can't believe their eyes. Traces of the civilized world are gone, and they are surrounded by the remnants of a destroyed city, overgrown with trees and grass. Moreover, all the carriages have disappeared without a trace, except for the fifth one they were in. As time passes, the passengers begin to get acquainted. One of the guys, Shirahama, a firefighter, examines the injured and suggests checking the tunnel behind the carriage. He is joined by a girl named Katana and a guy named Hayashima, who also wants to understand what happened. Meanwhile, the police in the city cannot figure out where the last 2 carriages have gone, while the rest of the train, along with the passengers, remains undamaged. The 3 volunteers enter the tunnel and walk through the dark underworld for a long time. Suddenly, they notice a light ahead and hurry towards it, but when they emerge outside, they are astonished. There is nothing around that would remind them of the year 2023 with skyscrapers and technology, just a vast, lifeless desert. Shocked, the trio returns to their fellow misfortune mates. Initially, people do not believe their report, but after Hayashima shows a video recording of the surroundings, they are forced to accept the new reality. After 7 hours, people languish in anticipation of rescuers, when one of the girls, Reni, secretly looks into Hayashima's bag and finds a letter marked with the criminal department's seals, leading her to suspect that the guy's a criminal. Then Reni snatches food from Katana's bag, but, thinking she was seen, discards the package. Hayashima picks it up and carries it to the train, just as Katana discovers the theft. Seeing it in the guy's hands, the passengers accuse him of theft. Moreover, Reni reports about the letter from the colony. Offended, Hayashima denies the accusations and announces his departure. At this time, Shirahama pulls out a box of fruits and offers to share them. While Katana is distributing the food, one of the guys reviews the video he made earlier, clearly showing Reni stealing the food. Realizing that Hayashima is innocent, Shirahama and Katana run after him, managing to save the guy who nearly falls into a deep ditch. In gratitude, he confesses that he works as a hairdresser and is already 30 years old. But he refuses to explain the origin of the letter from the colony. Night falls. Passengers somehow settle down to sleep, but many cannot sleep, worrying about their future. In the morning, people begin to realize that they may never return home. Shirahama tries to gather the scattering people, but a friend asks the guide not to take responsibility for others' lives. Then the firefighter confesses that because of him, his colleague was injured, losing the ability to walk. Now he believes he must help everyone he can. Together, they catch up with those who left and persuade them to return to the carriage to solve problems collectively. Seeing this, Hayashima remembers his brother who was in prison, and the letter in his bag was from him. Fate had it that he had to take on the upbringing of his younger brother, and he still feels guilty for his older brother becoming a criminal. Meanwhile, a couple of passengers explore the surrounding area and find the ruins of a high tower. This is particularly strange because the news reported its construction, which was supposed to be completed in 2026. And one of the passengers found a can in the forest dated that year. A biologist among them encountered a plant whose genetic modification takes 30 years. It turns out that they are in the distant future of Earth, and it's far from a joyful discovery. At the same time in 2023, all channels are broadcasting messages about the disappearance of 2 carriages, which had at least 100 passengers. Night approaches and many fall into despair, while Katana and Shirahama place plastic containers on the roof of the carriage, hoping for rain. In the morning, the biologist draws the others' attention to the dense greenery, which means there must be a body of water nearby. A group of youth sets out to explore the forest. Along the way, Hayashima confesses that his parents are criminals, and then the guy spots a frog. This means water is very close, but ahead are impassable cliffs, which can only be climbed with the help of ropes. The group returns to the train and, cutting wires, heads back to the cliffs. Shirahama climbs to the top and joyfully shouts upon seeing a waterfall, but looking around he is horrified. Instead of Mount Fuji, a sea stretches out before him. Returning, he tells the others about this, and people start to speculate what happened to their planet. At night, everyone goes to sleep, but the eldest passenger, Tanaka, goes outside and sees an unfamiliar person. But when he tells about it, no one believes him. Then it starts to rain, helping people to collect water and even bathe. Meanwhile, the biologist continues to study the surrounding fauna, finds several edible plants, and shows them to the others. And still, Katana manages to eat a poisonous berry, but fortunately, her poisoning is not fatal. The news that the girl has recovered has a sobering effect on the passengers. They finally realize that sitting still, they won't survive. People get to work and even make utensils from bamboo. Bank cards turn out to be decent knives. The group of youths brings water from the waterfall, and they prepare a soup from plants. But after dinner, some feel sick and the biologist discovers a couple of poisonous berries in the common pot. Someone remembers seeing Tanaka near the pot, who is not among them. Shirahama sets out to look for him, but stumbles, falls, and loses his torch. After a while, Shirahama returns without Tanaka, but with Hayashima's previously lost barber tools, which he had sorely missed. In the morning, the biologist announces to the people that he is going to look for a river, which should be nearby. His friends go with him. But in the forest, they encounter a stranger who injures the biologist and runs away. The guys carry him back to the train, where fortunately there is a medical student who provides the injured with first aid. The others help as much as they can and pray for the guy. Later, Tanaka unexpectedly returns from the forest. It turns out he worked for a security company and can show how to make traps around the camp. Reni asks Hayashima to fix her hair, and soon there's a cue for the guy. Meanwhile, Shirahama and Katana notice a teenager caught in one of the traps, but the youngster gets out on his own and runs away. The friends hurry after him and soon find themselves by the river, but the boy asks them to wait for him at the spot and disappears into the forest. Hayashima, noticing their disappearance, catches up with the pair. At this time, the teenager returns and leads the friends to carriage number 6, which mysteriously ended up several kilometers away from the 5th carriage. The passengers from the 5th carriage are welcomed by the leader of the group from the 6th carriage, Yumamoto. Their carriage was lucky to be near the river, where there was plenty of fresh water and fish. Moreover, among them was a builder who, under his guidance, they were able to quickly set up a camp and even build a kitchen and a toilet. The newcomers find the one who injured their biologist. He confesses that he did it out of fear, thinking they were going to attack him. He bows deeply, apologizing for his action. And Yumamoto admits that he believes a return to the past is possible. The man told them that in the early days, they found a small boat on the river, where he managed to fix the radio and catch a signal, apparently from Canada, where the year 2060 was mentioned. From what he heard, the man understood that in 2026 a disaster occurred. A huge asteroid fell to Earth, causing powerful earthquakes and tsunamis worldwide, instantly taking billions of lives. The dust thrown into the atmosphere blocked sunlight, leading to the extinction of the remaining species. But the main thing is that the asteroid didn't fall by chance. It was space debris, as besides state corporations, satellites began to be launched by anyone who fancied. One of the probes collided with a satellite, which in turn fell onto an asteroid, leading to a deviation of its orbit. So it was a man-made disaster. That's why it's so important to return to their year and change the future. Inspired by the example of the 6th carriage, the passengers decided to make a bath by the river. Meanwhile, Tanaka continues to deteriorate, making himself a doll from branches and talking to it. In the morning, the bath is ready. For the first time in many days, people bathe in hot water and wash their clothes. And the guys find a strange stone on the riverbank, which Yumamoto learns about. He sends his people to find it, but Reni notices strangers, and one of the guys lets slip that according to their leader, this stone might help them return home. The girls argue about the need to return, and Reni pushes Katana away. She falls and accidentally shifts a layer of soil under which a dead body is discovered. Meanwhile, Tanaka reads in a newspaper an announcement about the search for a murderer in his description. At that time, Reni and Katana are attacked by guys from the 6th carriage, but Reni breaks free and runs to her own, where she tells about the found corpse, while Katana escapes from the guys through the forest. The 5th carriage decides to make weapons, while Shirahama and Hayashima run to the neighbors. But the girl is not there, and Katana meanwhile makes it to the boat. Yumamoto is forced to confess to the guys that he killed one of the passengers, who suddenly became aggressive and started attacking people with a knife. That's why he was recognized as a leader. The guys go home, hoping that Katana has returned, but she's not there, and the rest urge to go to the 6th carriage and punish the guilty. And the guys go again to look for the girl. Katana hides in the boat when Yumamoto comes in. He pretends to be calling an unknown station, but the girl sees that the wires are cut. The man discovers her and confesses that he doesn't want to return to the past because he intends to create a new society here. After that, he ties up Katana and locks her in the cabin, where her screams cannot be heard. In the morning, the passengers of the 5th carriage are just about to attack the neighbors when one of the women suggests backing up and looking for a building where they could hide. At this time, guys from the 6th carriage go to the neighbors to scavenge something, but they fall into traps. A fight starts when the rest of the 6th carriage's passengers arrive, and there are more men among them. The fight escalates into a real battle, which is stopped by the appearance of the escaped Katana, who accuses Yumamoto of lying. He is forced to admit to the deception, but he just wanted to keep people's spirits up. However, the passengers decide to exile the former leader. Before leaving, the man hands over a journal from the ship, which contains information about the tower that could help them return to the past. Meanwhile, those who went to search for the building reach the tower and find glowing asteroid fragments there. And in 2023, scientist Ray, after reviewing the video surveillance camera recordings, discovers that a wormhole appeared in the tunnel at the moment of the disappearance of 2 carriages, which apparently was the result of a distortion in the space-time continuum. The passengers study the journal found by Yamamoto and learn the exact date of the disaster. Moreover, they have an asteroid fragment that possesses a phenomenal magnetic charge. One of the passengers remembers how on the day of their departure, he saw something in the sky resembling a falling star. In the past, Ray, analyzing the same event, concludes that it was the flare from a supernova explosion. In the future, there's also an expert who explains that supernovas occur in space when a star reaches the end of its life cycle and explodes, releasing a massive amount of energy. Apparently, this created the temporal rift into which both carriages fell. It means they need to open this wormhole again. In the evening, a strong storm begins, forcing people to seek more reliable shelter than the carriage. Tanaka opens the rear doors leading into the tunnel. Unexpectedly, a strong gust snatches his doll and sucks it into the wormhole caused by the hurricane. But as soon as the storm subsides, the wormhole disappears. And in 2023, scientists find Tanaka's doll. Passengers in the future conclude that to summon the wormhole, they need a powerful energy source, for which they start looking for remnants of power lines. Digging up each post, the passengers find an electrical substation where, somehow, working equipment is preserved. They redirect enough electricity into the tunnel to stabilize the wormhole with the onset of the next storm, enough to return to the past. The storm starts at night, supported by the power of the substation. The wormhole opens, and everyone enters the carriage except Tanaka, who refused to return. The carriage is swallowed by the hole and races somewhere in space and time until its doors are opened by security service employees who say they have arrived on May 1, 2026, which means there are only a few months left before the asteroid falls. After going through quarantine procedures, the passengers tell the officials, presenting as evidence fragments of the meteorite and unusual plants from the future. Only the officials don't believe the stories about the upcoming apocalypse. Later, the internet buzzes about the incident. The time travelers find fans, which helps maintain interest in the traveler's story about the upcoming end of the world. Meanwhile, scientist Ray becomes convinced that the travelers are telling the truth, as he has also tracked the asteroid. One of the passengers posts an appeal on the internet telling ordinary people about the impending danger, and a passenger who held a high position in the government before the trip makes her way to the Minister of Defense. She listens to her former colleague and reports that the government believed them and is already preparing to launch a missile capable of altering the asteroid's trajectory to pass by Earth. Time passes, and the day of the catastrophe is about to dawn. The travelers decide to gather together on the platform to find out whether it was possible to avert the disaster, and if not, to perish together. But the military successfully completes their task and changes the meteorite's trajectory, saving humanity from total extinction. Quite an unusual series where various theories about the impending doom of humanity are mixed. And the finale of the story is very relevant, emphasizing that life on Earth is the result of the actions of each living being. And the future of the planet is a collective human responsibility. Bob is an ordinary man at first glance, living in a small northern town and working at a lumber mill. His ex-family, his wife Darlene and daughter Eva, live far from him. Their relationship is strained. The girl has reached a troublesome age, behaving oddly and completely ignoring her mother. One ordinary day, Bob returns home and receives a call from Darlene, who complains about their daughter and asks him to influence her. However, Bob asks to be forgotten and ends the call abruptly. Yet, he is deeply upset by Eva's behavior, and to relieve some tension, heads to a bar where he soon notices a dealer. Later they meet on the street. The young man tells him that his boss, Nelson, is in need of couriers. He remembers Bob from his NHL days, especially a famous fight Bob would rather forget. The man cuts off the young man's enthusiasms and buys some goods, dismayed by the rising prices. At work, Bob goes to inspect one of the malfunctioning blocks of the crusher. He climbs up to the machine and stares inside as if he wants to step into the blades. His grim thoughts are interrupted by a coworker's voice, and Bob abandons the frightening idea. Later, Bob tells his boss he needs a few days off, packs his things, and goes on a trip. However, on the night road, he suddenly feels very ill. Racked with pain, he loses control, and his pickup veers off the road. Barely recovering, Bob calls Nelson and then reaches a roadside cafe where he immediately heads to the bathroom, startling patrons with his bloodied face. Overcoming pain, Bob washes the blood off his hands, which are already bandaged, and then examines his side. It becomes clear that a piece of his skin has become invisible, making his internal organs clearly visible. Bob bandages himself with towels and returns to the dining area, where Nelson soon arrives. The dealer agrees to tow and fix his pickup, in exchange for which Bob will have to serve as his courier, especially since he is heading in the needed direction. Nelson admires his hockey talent and confesses he still watches his old games. He tries to offer support, but Bob cuts off his attempts to befriend him and reluctantly agrees to become a courier. Nelson brings Bob home, then heads to a dump frequented by bears. This time, he shoots one of the animals and guts it on the spot. In the morning, Nelson delivers to Bob a container with the animal's organs, which are to be sold on the black market. The pickup is already repaired, and Bob sets off. He reaches his ex-wife's house late in the evening. Darlin lets Bob inside and informs him that Eva is staying over at a friend's. In the morning, Bob prepares to meet Nelson's contact, who runs a repair shop in town. At that moment, Eva appears. She is happy to see her father, but feels hurt when he refuses to take her with him. Bob drives to the shop, where the owner's employees greet him with a search, but the owner recognizes the former hockey player. He warns that working with Nelson is dangerous and advises thinking about the future. Nevertheless, he hands over the package for the dealer, and noticing Bob's unwell appearance, he gives him a Chinese remedy he gets from a local store. Later, Bob returns home. Ava also notices that her father is feeling unwell, but he brushes it off as Rib's injured at work. Suddenly, the girl asks about the diagnosis of her grandfather, Bob's father, who had died long ago. The man explains that his father voluntarily left this life because he had some issues with his head. After the conversation, Eva runs off to her friends, but on the way she stops by a Chinese pharmacy. The seller is very welcoming and even suggests visiting a doctor who is available right there in the next room. Even when the girl refuses to buy anything, the seller gives Eva herbal tea to improve her skin. Later, Eva meets up with her friends, who suggest going on a tour of an abandoned psychiatric hospital. Although Eva's friend doesn't want to go, Eva insists on visiting more than anyone else. They wander around the creepy rooms, scaring each other with possible ghost encounters. Eva confesses that her grandfather was once a patient there, whom she never knew as he died before she was born. She hopes to find old documents and learn his diagnosis. The group descends into the basement, where they are frightened by a figure in a white sheet, but on a closer look it turns out to be just a pile of rags. However, Eva's friend in terror grabs her hand, tugs at her sleeve, and sees a transparent hand. The girl gets even more frightened and runs away from Eva. Meanwhile, her parents recall their years together and Eva's childhood pranks, like when she went to school on her own at the age of 6. In the morning, Darlin discovers that Eva didn't spend the night at home. She, her friend, and Bob begin to search for the girl, but she's neither at the hospital nor the police station. Darlin goes to the station to file a report, and Bob starts investigating his daughter's belongings. He finds her phone and reads a chat with friends about the planned excursion. The couple goes to Eva's friend's house, but her father says their daughter isn't there. Later, Bob calls Nelson and reports that the delivery will be delayed. The dealer is very displeased. After this, Bob finds Eva's friends. They act provocatively, and the man loses control. After a scuffle, a boy admits they were at the psychiatric hospital. Bob realizes she was looking for her grandfather's data. At the same time, Eva regains consciousness in an iron cage. Meanwhile, her parents drive to the psychiatric hospital and enter the still-functioning part. The security tries to stop them from entering, but Bob gets into a fight and collapses from severe pain. The chief physician comes out, who remembers both his father and Bob well. She asks Darlin to leave her husband in the clinic, as he is not well. Bob remembers himself as a little boy in the same corridor. Later, he argues with the doctor, who calls what happened to his father a tragic accident, as he saw it all himself. The woman confesses that his father wanted to die to hide his illness from others. He was very afraid for his family. Bob immediately remembers how his father asked not to show him to his son. The doctor reminds that she couldn't stop the disease, but she protected the man. She shows the room of his father from where he watched his son's life and offers Bob to stay in the clinic. She will study his illness and provide all necessary care, but Bob categorically refuses as Eva needs him. Nevertheless, they lock him up. However, at night he wakes up to the sound of an opening door and sees that the way is clear and a bunch of keys to the clinic doors is on the bedside table. Bob dresses and leaves. He arrives home, but Darlin isn't there. Only her friend is going crazy with worry for the missing ones. Then Nelson calls again and starts threatening Bob, listing his family members, which drives the man over the edge. Hearing his swearing, Darlin's friend tells him that girls have been disappearing in the town for a long time and demands that something be done. He goes to her friend's house again, and this time he manages to meet her. The girl confesses that she now knows her friend's secret. She is the same as him. She hands over Eva's backpack that was left with her. Bob examines it and finds a package with Chinese tea in the same packaging that he himself received from the owner of the workshop for Nelson. He goes to the man and asks questions about the missing girls. The man is offended. Despite his illegal activities, he is a father and grandfather and would not kidnap people. He tells about the Chinese pharmacy. Meanwhile, unknown people examine Ava, probing her wounds, causing the girl to cry. Bob finds the pharmacy and tells the seller about his missing daughter. The woman is scared, but afraid to tell the truth. Then Bob notices Eva's bicycle in the back of the shop. He removes his hood. The woman is horrified, seeing his disappearing flesh, and she realizes that the girl is just like him. She tries to protect the doctor, glancing towards his office. Realizing this, Bob rushes in that direction, stripping off his clothes along the way. He descends into the basement, finds the doctor and his assistant, and starts beating them, demanding his daughter back. Then he hears Eva's voice calling him from a cage. Seeing what her father looks like, Ava is scared, but Bob calms her down and opens the cage, but the doctor manages to wound him. Bob leaves with his daughter. As a parting gift, the seller gives him tea that will help Ava and advises them to run. Father and daughter arrive home. Darlin immediately begins to provide help. It turns out she knew the father's secret and knows what to do. She couldn't confess to her daughter because she was afraid for her. In the morning, Bob regains consciousness and tells his daughter that he had to leave because of the illness. Ava confesses that she quit sports when she started having the same issues. She thought she was alone in this, but it turns out that her father and grandfather also suffered from invisibility. Later, Bob prepares to leave, although Eva doesn't want him to go, but the man confesses that his strength is leaving him, and soon everyone might find out his secret. He says goodbye to Darlin as Eva appears at the doorway with bags, intending to drive her father home herself. Through tears, the mother agrees to let her go. Father and daughter set off. Along the way, Eva starts asking questions. Bob admits that after what he experienced in childhood, he couldn't burden his family, so he left. The daughter promises to make up for everything they missed in their relationship. Soon they arrive at the place where Nelson's new courier is waiting. Bob needs to meet him, but he notices that his face is also beginning to disappear. Eva covers the void with foundation, and the father goes to the meeting. He delivers the package passed by his boss and returns to the car. Soon they reach Bob's home, and the father hands over the tea he got from the Chinese lady to Ava. She brews it and cares for her weakened father. He assures her that she can live here peacefully. People in the north don't meddle in each other's affairs. Meanwhile, Nelson opens the package and finds that he has been deceived. Ava goes shopping, and the dealer notices her. Later, the girl tries to calm her father, who has become almost invisible, and after a while he suddenly says that it's time for him to go, because later he simply will not be able to accomplish what he planned. He is ready to disappear at the sawmill, which he had already tried to do. Despite her objections, Bob drives to the factory, but standing over the crusher, he suddenly stops. At this time, an armed Nelson bursts into his house. He threatens the girl with a shotgun, demanding to know where Bob is. Even though Eva says that he sold the house to her, the man realizes it's not true since Bob's belongings are still there. He accuses Bob of dishonesty and decides to take it out on his daughter. Suddenly, something throws him away from Ava. The girl realizes that her father, who has become completely invisible, has returned and is using this to beat the villain. Bob demands that he leave his family alone, but misjudging his strength, kills the dealer. He confesses that he could not leave his daughter a second time, and now he will always be with her. Later they dump Nelson's body at the dump, where a bear finds it. Eva buys herself tinted glasses, sits in the empty car, and talks to her father, who advises her to drink her magic tea, as it helps. And he confesses that back then, when she was 6, he secretly followed her to school. Also, his father had told him that he did not want his son to see him like that. And he always thought his father meant death. But then, who pulled him out of the psychiatric hospital? Eva immediately remembers the white figure from the basement, smiles, and suggests talking to her grandfather. The seatbelt buckles the void, and father and daughter set off. An unusual Canadian horror film, shot amidst the harsh northern nature. A mix of genres ranging from action to thriller and horror, plus a bit of sentimental drama. All this captivates and compels one to watch the film to the end, although initially it seems quite gloomy.